I think it's about time to get into our first story of the day. And it is by AugustisMartisVT. I have his book right here, which I'm so excited about. We're going to be reading a couple stories from him that he's posted for free on Reddit. And then these stories are a part of his wider universe. And he's in the chat. He can correct me if he's wrong. I believe these are a part of his wider universe that he has made into a complete books. He's made into a complete book, right, within this wider universe. So if you enjoy the story as we're reading them, you can put !Augustus in the chat and the link to the book will pop up. Yeah, dude, I got it already and I'm so excited. Yeah, you put !Augustus in the chat, the link will pop up, you can buy it. And so if you like his writing style and you want to read more, the book is out there. Or I think a lot of it is posted on Reddit as well, if you don't have the money to spend on it. Yeah, I've read the foreword already and it made me tear up. It really made me tear up. It's kind of a love letter to the Creepcast community and the all writers as a whole. And it gives a little bit of background of his story. And so I think it's worth reading. Dude, I would love to get assigned if we ever have a chance to meet one day. It'd be awesome. Yeah, if there's ever a Creepcast event, I really do plan on going. I know there was one, I think, in Chicago a few months ago, but I'm in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and I'm a full-time graduate student, and so don't have the funds to do it. But yeah, guys, I just, if you enjoy the writing, check it out. Free signings for anyone you know on Discord. Awesome, dude. I'm gonna be the same way whenever I get a book published one day, assuming I do. So yeah, just last thing I'll say about the book. I know I keep yapping on about it. Buy this if you're interested. I'm so excited to have met this guy. I haven't read a lot of his work yet, but Augustus seems like a really good writer, and we're about to read more of his stuff. So !Augustus in the chat and check it out. The art is really cool. I'm not sure who he had do the art, but it's great. And the foreword and what little I've read is very well written. So keep that in mind. Hey, Arkanen, how's it going, dude? I remember you from last time. I really appreciate you hopping back in again. I got the bad printing. So this is what came. I ordered it on Saturday morning on Amazon. And this is what came. So if you're ordering on Amazon, I imagine this is what anyone who orders on Amazon is getting. So there might be something for you to check out with your supplier or whoever that works. But I'll say it one more time for the new chatter, Jay Wickoy. How's it going, dude? Here is the book from Augustus. We're about to be reading one of his short stories. So if you enjoy it, feel free to ! Yeah, and this will be worth a lot of money one day. ! Augustus in the chat. You can find the link to the book. It's gonna be worth a lot of money once you make it big time. One of your first book, first copy, it's gonna be rare, right? I'm glad you mentioned that, Plague. I'm gonna be sure to hold on to it even if I get the new copy. So let's go ahead and get started. We're gonna be reading I Dread Falling Asleep Every Night Because Every Morning I Don't Wake Up by AugustisMartisVT. Every single night, no matter how bad the day was, I lay in bed and fight to stay awake. I lay there, staring at the ceiling until my eyes are bloodshot and stinging, my jaw aching from the constant yawning. It isn't insomnia or any similar medical condition that you might find in your medical journals or DSM-5. It isn't anything physical either. I don't suffer from chronic pain or a melatonin deficiency or anything like that. And no, it's not nightmares either. God, how to welcome a good nightmare at this point. At least those fade away when you wake up and you can continue your day to day. No, it's none of that. I struggle so hard in this Sisyphean task because I know that when I finally lose the fight and let my eyes drift close, I won't be the one who opens them in the morning. The first time it happened, I tried to wake myself up. I simply knew it was just a strange dream. I told myself that I'd wake up any minute, back in my bed with a funny dream to tell my coworkers, whoever they were back then. I don't even remember who my coworkers were back then. You see, I had fallen asleep in my own bed, but when I woke up, I was in a different room entirely. A different country, actually. Fucking England, if you can imagine. The first thing I noticed was the wallpaper and drapes. The walls were this awful pale green with intricate eggshell hued patterns across them, and the curtains this grotesque pink-purple suede. My first guess, as I rubbed focus into my eyes, was that I had hooked up with some wine aunt turned cougar at the bar the night before, and she had brought me back to her decrepit mother's home for a few rounds of hide the sausage. The irony of that thought was not long wasted on me, as you will soon understand. You see, as I turned over, I saw a 60-something man sleeping next to me. At that moment, I had my second thought of the morning. Wait, how much did I drink last night? So instead of waking up the snoring gentleman, I decided to extricate myself carefully from the situation and never think about the implications of the previous night again. My body felt uneven as I went to get out of the bed. I reached over to steady myself on the nightstand and was surprised by the wrinkled hand with an overly complicated polished job on the nails that stabilized my shifting weight. I looked at the hand in confusion, my mind unable to comprehend what it meant. That's when I noticed a family picture on the dresser. The snoring man beside me, 3 kids of various ages, and a woman that beamed the way only suburban moms do on family picture day. And the woman's hand, resting on the youngest child's shoulder, had a very ornate set of nails. I searched the house in a daze until I found the bathroom mirror, and staring back at me was that woman's face, if only 5 or so years older. I screamed, of course. Who wouldn't? But the sound that came out wasn't mine. It was higher, thinner, like someone else's lungs were squeezing the air. I grabbed at my face, my arms, but all I felt was unfamiliar skin, unfamiliar weight. The man in the bed, her husband, I realized, jolted awake. He grabbed my shoulders, his face pale with panic. What's wrong? What's happening to you? His voice cracked like he was begging me not to answer. I couldn't. I just shook my head and sobbed, clawing at my cheeks like maybe I could tear my way back to myself. By the end of the day, I was in a hospital gown, lights too bright overhead, doctors muttering about a psychotic break. I tried to tell them the truth, that I wasn't who they thought I was. But of course, that only made it worse. They strapped me down for transfer. I fought so hard against the restraints that the EMT slid a needle into my arm. My last sight was the ambulance ceiling flickering with passing streetlights, and then the sedative hit. When my eyes opened again, I was in another bed, another body, another life. That happened 2 more times. The screaming, the panic, the desperate explanations that only made things worse. A psychiatric hold once, heavy sedation another. Always the same end. I'd closed my eyes under the effect of their medications and immediately woke up in another stranger's skin. But the third time, I realized what I had to do. If I didn't want to spend every morning restrained and screaming, I had to stop drawing attention to myself. That became my new pattern. Each morning I woke up in a new body, scrambling for clues of who I was, checking wallets, phones, and emails, reading texts to guess at relationships, studying family photos like a cheat sheet. This is starting to remind me, if anyone's read it, of A Shattered Life by Matt Domersky. Really great story, super similar premise, but I'm loving this. I imagine being in this situation, waking up as different people every night, and of course you're going to be like freaking out trying to explain to people what's going on, but your instincts are only going to make things worse. It's rough. It's terrifying. And of course reading, we can be like play it cool. But if you were in this situation, you would be doing the exact same thing. So it's skilled writing. And it's strong. The story has gripped me already, and I'm really loving this. Sometimes I slipped up, call a kid by the wrong name, stared too long at a questioning coworker's face I didn't recognize, forgot the layout of a familiar street, and take an extra hour to arrive home. But I discovered something else too. Whatever body I landed in, I could still speak, read, and understand their languages. I could ride a bike I had never touched before, or play a few bars of piano with hands that weren't mine. Muscle memory carried me where knowledge could not. Sometimes people notice. Sometimes I make it through the day without raising suspicion. Once, I even tracked down the person I had been the day before. I just had to know if what I did mattered. If they remembered me. But they didn't. They were fine. Happy, even. They just seemed to have had an off day. A little scatterbrains, maybe. But otherwise completely themselves. Once, in a fit of desperation, I tried to end it. I thought maybe it would break the cycle. Maybe kill me for real. I waited until I was in the body of someone with as little family and as few connections as possible. I found a knife in the kitchen, pressed it hard against my borrowed wrist, and dragged it up past the bend of their elbow. But it wasn't me who died. The next morning I opened my eyes in yet another body, but I carried the memory of the last one bleeding out on the drug-spattered linoleum. And worse, I carried the knowledge that when she was herself again, she never came back. She was just gone. I had actually killed her. When I searched the news article, I couldn't find much. How often do they report on drug addicts killing themselves when they couldn't get a fix? God, that's fucking terrifying. This is such a new take on horror. Something I've never seen before is being born as someone else. It's like Happy Death Day, but you're in someone else's body, and the actions you take don't reset at the end of the day. It's terrifying. That is so original and so well written. It wasn't until many lives later that I confirmed she was truly gone. The guilt nearly crushed me. I swore never to try again. I'm so sorry, Ginny. So now I drift through lives like a parasite that is trying to act beneficial, unsure if I am doing more damage than good. An 8-year-old boy with bruises on his arms, sitting in the counselor's office with a juice box, finally whispering the truth about home. A nurse trembling under hospital lights, fumbling for names, relieved when her hands remembered how to set an IV even though her mind was blank. A prisoner staring at tally marks he didn't carve, heart pounding too hard to ask the man in the bunk above what crime he was supposed to have paid for. A soldier haunted by wars I never fought, his body still jerking to attention at any louder than a whisper sound. A woman at a bus stop clutching a folder of job applications, practicing a smile she couldn't make real. An old man shuffling from the recliner to the bathroom, terrified of the day he might forget which door led where. Each morning I dig through pockets and inboxes and photo albums until I can fake my way through another day, praying not to do any lasting damage. And every night I end the same way I began this one, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, fighting a war I can never win. My eyes burn, my jaw aches from yawning, but I keep holding on, desperate to stretch the hours just a little longer, terrified that I might make another Jenny one day. Because when I finally lose the fight, when sleep takes me, I know the truth. I won't be the one who wakes up. Wow. Oh my god. That was amazing. That was really good. That's one of the best stories I've read on Reddit. I really, really love that. It's so like, first of all, if you enjoyed that, of course, the first thing you should do is check out this book by Augustus, or at least check out his other stories on Reddit. But other than that, A Shattered Life by Matt Demersky, similar premise, but it goes in a very, very different direction. like the opposite direction. So it's obviously not inspired by that, or at least it's not too similar to that, but it is like it starts off relatively similar, but goes in very separate directions. That was good. That was well done. I really, really enjoyed that. 1 second, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and run to the bathroom really quick. But when we get back, we're gonna read another story by Augustus, and then we're gonna move on to some more after that. So I really, really enjoyed that. All right, we're back. I just want to say, guys, isn't it crazy to have like so many talented people in the community? Like, I don't want to sit here and just gas up Augustus too much, but just being honest, like, that was great writing, and there's so many good writers in the community. This had 18 upvotes, guys. Not that many people have seen this until now, right? And he's great, but there's also so many other great writers out there, and we're not even seeing them, right? So when you find someone you like, and make sure to let them know. If you read a story you like, let them know that you liked it, because that can be the difference between someone continuing to go and someone continuing to write and someone giving up. So just let them know, because that was a great story. So let's hop into the next one. So another story by Augustus. Again, exclamation point Augustus in the chat if you want to explore his full novel, which I definitely plan on reading it in full this week. Hey, Plaguey, that's okay, dude. Like, I think a lot of us in this chat are relatively new to writing. I've only been writing seriously for, about a year or so, but we're all like, everyone in here is so nice. And I think what we all care about in here, we're not like pompous, scholarly types. We care more about ideas and just having a good story, right? And anyone can do that. You don't have to be a super seasoned practice writer to have a good idea. So don't be nervous about writing, and just put stuff out there. All right, so The Bitter Youth, a Bitterverse Halloween story. It was the night of October 31st, 1995. We were 13, and we made a pact to fully enjoy our last All Hallows Eve in masks. I can remember, clear as day, the plastic thump clink of our candy buckets bumping into each other as we set out from Leo's house. Our fearless leader led the way down Sycamore Street, cape flapping at his shoulders with each confident stride. He had the type of commanding presence that made him the center of every group he stood with, no matter the size and the age of those around him. What many would call a natural-born leader, without a drip of irony. Kylie Clark, or KK as she preferred, and Richie followed, their free hands intertwined awkwardly in the earnest excitement of finally being a real couple after Richie finally worked up the courage to ask her out. That didn't stop Leo from sweeping them up in the wake of his huge personality. You became his friend through sheer force of his charisma, and once he invited you in, you truly felt like you belonged with all the other broken toys. Broken toys like me. I trailed closely behind the three of them, a half step out of rhythm with their natural tempo. I was the newest addition to the band of misfits, but even so, I already felt like they wanted me to belong, even as I struggled to find the pacing of their steps. It was as if I stuck out because of my own shortcomings, not because they were pushing me out. What else was new? The autumn air smelled of sweet decay. Fallen leaves ground into the damp pavement, a hint of scented candle wax from jack-o'-lanterns on porches, and wood smoke from a neighbor's front yard fire pit. I kept patting my coat pocket, feeling for the small mirror and the mini manila envelope hidden inside. The edges of that envelope crinkled under my fingertips, both reassuring and dangerous. Inside was a sleek, perfect raven feather I'd stowed away days ago. Insurance for a plan I hadn't yet dared to voice to my group of friends. We moved under flickering orange streetlights, four silhouettes beneath a drizzle of golden leaves and costumed youth. KK skipped ahead, singing some obscure Halloween parody of a golden oldie, letting out a warbling ghost ooh as her breath puffed out in long trails in the late October chill. I watched them through the wavering glow of carved pumpkins lighting the sidewalk of the suburban neighborhood. I shook off the unease. It was one of those nights where every shadow felt alive. At the walkway of Mrs. Blanchard's house, windows permanently dark ever since she passed in July, Leo paused at the crack that marked the boundary between the sidewalk and her walkway. Should we? He asked softly enough that his inquiry carried no clouds of warmth. We all knew this porch. Last year she'd pressed hot cider into our hands and told us we were growing too fast. Now the windows were black as the night sky, and the sign on the front lawn marked it as sold, even though we'd all think of it as Mrs. Blanchard's house for the rest of our days. We skip, Richie said plainly. His voice was as firm as the eyes that stared at the heretical sign. Even so, he squeezed KK's hand for strength. We stepped past the turnoff and continued toward the next house, leaving that pocket of positive memories to rot for a bit longer. Further down, as we compared candy halls under a streetlight, KK nudged me. Sammy, what are you thinking about? She asked. I realized I'd been quiet for too long, eyes drawn to a particular maple tree at the end of the block. Its leaves were a perfect collage of green and gold catching the light. I cleared my throat. Just how some streets feel like they hold more memories than others. It was true enough. Each cul-de-sac held ghosts of the past 3 years for me. Places where I had laughed with my dad before I even became friends with him after I sought to public school. Tonight those memories felt close enough to catch a reflection of them in the puddles along the curbs. Leo cracked open a full-size candy bar he'd charmed off a neighbor and split it into 4 parts to share with us. We ate in a circle on the curb, chocolate and caramel melting slowly on our tongues as we shared a silence of contemplation. I found myself watching Leo in the orange glow, his eyes warm and alive as they swept over us. My heart stumbled. I looked away toward the maple tree blazing at the end of the street, where a few leaves still clung. KK broke the silence. So, high school next year? Her tone was light, but I heard the worry underneath. Where do you think we'll be this time next year? Richie managed a grin, probably buried in homework. It's the only way I'll survive algebra. He got a soft laugh from KK, but then his smile faltered. Honestly, I'm not sure. The thought of swapping to the new high school makes me a bit nervous. Leo clapped Richie on the back. We'll stick together, he said, certainty in every syllable. Ever our fearless leader, ever the optimist. Same lunch table, at least, right? Right, I added, quiet but firm. The word felt like a defiance against the unknown. I wanted to believe it could be that simple, that we could hold this night in our teeth and not let the future yank it away, even as it chewed into our youth. I looked down at the candy wrappers shimmering in my plastic pumpkin bucket, bright coins paid out for a childhood nearly behind us. A question burned at the back of my throat. If I didn't ask now, I never would. I dug the toe of my sneaker into a fallen leaf. Have you guys heard about the Mistress of Dusk? I tried to keep my voice casual, as if it were just another ghost story. My pulse quickened, thundering in my ear once I said the name. Richie raised an eyebrow. Is that a band or something? KK perked up, excitement already bubbling through her. Oh, sounds like one of those urban legends you were always talking about. Her eyes gleamed, cheap Halloween makeup glitter catching the light. The way she said it didn't feel like mocking at all. It felt as if she were earnestly interested. Leo leaned in, intrigued by the prospect of a scary story. Lay it on us, Sammy. A street or two over, a burst of laughter and the high-pitched ch-ch of a disposable camera flash punctuated the quiet. I lowered my voice. They say if 4 people make the right offerings on Halloween night and call the Mistress of Dusk, she'll show you who you can become, and that it will always come true. Like who you'll be if you keep working hard or if you slack off. And if you ask to see a certain future self, she will show you the path to get there. Leo's grin widened and his charming chuckle rang out like trick bells. A Halloween ritual? You've been holding out on us? My face warmed. It's probably nothing, I mumbled, suddenly fearful I'd overplayed my hand. Just something I'd heard. But KK was already hooked. What kind of offerings would we have to make? That sounds like the start of a great anime, I swallowed, equal parts relief and nerves swirling. This was it. I pushed on. The legend says you need 4 things. A feather from a raven, a leaf that's run the full cycle from green to brown, wax from a candle that lived and died to light a face, and a mirror for her to claim. The words came out carefully, as if reciting from a book. KK and Leo exchanged amazed looks. Richie gave a skeptical snort, but I pressed on. I pulled out the small circular mirror I'd been carrying. Its surface caught the street lamp and threw back a faint, warped version of us on the curb. 4 kids huddled close, faces smudged by the night sweat ruining our costume makeup. My face was beating so hard I was sure they could see my pulse in my throat. Leo looked at the mirror in my palm and let out a delighted breath that sent a shiver through me. He really did come prepared, huh? I nodded sheepishly. I guess so. KK clapped, excitement trumping caution. This is perfect for our last trick-or-treat. Way better than a Ouija board. Richie gave a half shrug. Sure, why not? If we can find all that stuff. I wet my lips. I already have the feather, just in case we couldn't find one. I carefully pulled the small manila envelope from my coat pocket and tipped it to expose the black feather. It was iridescent, even in the low light of the orange street light. My bit of foresight earned me a raised brow from Richie, though he didn't protest aloud. Anyway, the leaf should be easy. I pushed on, glancing down the street to the maple tree still holding a few perfect leaves. A gust of wind sent a handful skittering toward us, each one a tiny life racing to its end, as if fate were guiding us toward the inevitable. But the wax, I'm not sure what to make of it, I admitted flatly. Well, we have all these jack-o'-lanterns, Leo said smoothly as he looked around the street pointedly. Wax from a candle that lived and died to light a face, KK repeated, almost reverently. Jack-o'-lantern candles count, right? I thought for a short moment before I nodded firmly. Yeah, that'll work. A jack-o'-lantern's candle lived to light a face, carved eyes and a grin, and when it burns out tonight, that'll be its death. We just need a bit of that wax. Leo was already on his feet, offering both hands to pull KK and me up. This is downright cinematic. I'm so in. KK took his hand with a giggle, and Richie hauled himself up without help. They all looked at me, waiting for the next move. The neighborhood around us buzzed low with distant voices and rustling leaves, but our little circle felt sealed off, holding its breath for what could come next. I tried to hide how my hands trembled as I tucked the mirror and feather back into my pockets. We, have to do it at the old community center court, I said, where the puddles will be calm enough to reflect the sky after the last night's rain. Leo cocked his head, intrigued. That busted court on Trelawney? The one with the walls closing it in? Yeah, I started walking, relieved to be moving, missing the fact that I was leading the way for once. The others fell in step. The book at the library said, a place where the earth has cracked open to show the sky. I think the rain puddles in the cracks are perfect. Yeah, figures you'd have a place in mind, Richie echoed, not unkind, but more like a friend who was on surprise by something you've done in hopes of surprising them. How long have you been planning this, Sammy? Heat crept up my neck. Not long, I muttered the tiny lie. It's probably nothing, like I said, but it's Halloween, right? Right, Leo agreed, flashing me a grin as we veered onto the next street. If there's a night for magic, it's tonight. As we headed toward that damn court, we grabbed the candle from a darkened jack-o'-lantern that had guttered out while we had schemed at the end of the street. We left the last streetlight behind and followed the sidewalk toward the brick-and-mortar bulk of the community center 3 streets down. The pavement grew uneven under our sneakers as we circled around the building, a chain-link fence enclosing the tennis court, abandoned due to the chilling of the seasons. The closer we got, the quieter the world became, the roaming packs of children and welcoming porch lights left behind. Richie unzipped his jacket pocket and cracked a glow stick, a faint green halo casting his face in alien light. KK received another from her boyfriend and cracked it to cast an orange hue over her features. The two blobs of colored light bobbed beside me as we worked our way into the fence. Leo unlatched the chain-link gate that hung crooked at the court's entrance. It groaned like a low, dragging cello note. Beyond, the tennis court lay cracked and wet. Shallow puddles filled the hollows in the concrete, shining like still silver mirrors. They reflected the overcast sky, a patchwork of bruised purple clouds with no moon or stars in sight, a starless sky both below and above. I led them to the center of the court. A single withered basketball hoop stood at the far end, a relic from before it was converted into a tennis court. The silence here was thick. Even our footsteps felt muted against the concrete, as if the night itself were a thick blanket of cold darkness. KK and Richie huddled close, their joined hands swinging between them. Leo stepped up beside me and squeezed my shoulder. "Okay, Captain. What's first?" I knelt and opened my backpack, which had stocked with a few more just-in-case items. From it I pulled a nub of white sidewalk chalk. With determined strokes, I drew a wide circle on the driest section of concrete. The others watched in silence until I straightened. "Everyone, step inside." We gathered within the rough chalk ring, 4 points around its edge, facing in. Our breaths mingled in the stale, cold air of the court. As I took the mirror from my pocket, a low wind sighed across the court. We all noticed. Our heads turned in unison toward the wall that should have blocked the wind from that direction. "Stupid downdrafts," Richie said, more to reassure himself than to convince us. "The candle wax," I whispered. Leo offered it out to me with a slight grin. It still held a bit of his hand's warmth as I molded it into the rough shape of a tree, a human, and then a four-legged animal that could be mistaken as a horse or a dog on a good day. 3 forms to mark the 3 deaths passing, the book had said, though I couldn't find what it meant by the 3 deaths. Oh my god. This is really built up into, like, we're getting to what I suppose is the climax of the story. And this is exciting. 3 deaths. That's, I don't know what to expect. I placed a still warm wax creation onto the mirror's face. It seemed to settle onto the mirror much more firmly than I would have expected, and the meeting of silver and white wax was ushered with another gust of wind, this time coming from the open direction, an inhale to the earlier exhale. Next, I placed the raven feather across the mirror, the iridescent barbs catching far too much light from the glow stick's faint radiance. The 4 of us all held our breath, waiting for another gust that did not come. Finally, I withdrew a large, half-gold, half-brown maple leaf I'd plucked from the ground by the tree earlier. Autumn's story caught in one sliver of time. I set the leaf gently at the center of the mirror, nearly encompassing the raven's feather. We stood over these offerings, 4 figures peering down at a mirror on cracked-down concrete, encircled by a scrawled ring of chalk. My pulse thrummed in my ears. Leo cleared his throat. "So, do we say something?" I realized I was holding my breath and uttered a low, long sigh. "The calling. The final step. Together. We have to invite her. Just repeat after me." KK tightened her grip on Richie's hand. Leo grinned at me and nodded. "The becoming at dusk, we call you," I spoke softly. The others replied to my call with their own shaky words. "We seek what only you can show," they echoed after me, their voices steadier now. "Accept our offering and appear. Mariga." Our words faded into the hush. For a moment, nothing changed. I heard Richie breathing, quick and shallow. KK bit her lip hard, eyes squeezed shut. Then, softly, ever so softly, came the sound of someone letting out a pleased exhale, nearly a breathless moan. It was a sound none of us, in our early teenage innocence, could have hoped to make. It carried the raw sensuality and eagerness that made a deep blush flood my cheeks immediately, something far too explicit for any of us. But none of us moved from our spots around the mirror. The two glow sticks went out in perfect harmony, plunging us into complete, utter darkness. They wrapped around us, deepening and pressing in like some form of inverted mist. I heard KK suck in a tiny gasp, but through the dark she sounded miles away. Leo muttered a curse under his breath, trying to sound tough and mostly failing. None of us moved. None of us could. All at once the night became smothered, all its color and sound stolen away. I could no longer hear distant cars or far-off laughter. Only the thudding of my heart and a faint ringing in my ears, like that ringing right before you black out, you know? The air smelled suddenly of damp earth and something else. A coppery sweetness like blood, a thick cinnamon bite, and the smoky hint of a blown-out candle. The mirror at our feet began reflecting a silvery light up from its surface. Despite no moonlight coming down to meet it, the thrice-formed wax quickly began melting again, as if the surface of the mirror were a skillet above a roaring bonfire, going from solid to liquid to hissing, popping steam in a matter of seconds. Yet there was no heat radiating from the mirror, nor were the feather and leaf affected by the transmutation of the wax. Droplets from the sudden boiling spread across the mirror's surface, then slid back together into a small white pool. The pool pilled itself into the crude outline of a face on the glass, a face made of wax instead of reflection. Its features stretched into a silent scream, then a euphoric grin that sent fresh heat to my cheeks before settling into a lethargic smile. It took far too long for me to realize that the face was made up of more wax than we had given. I only understood when pale hands pushed up beside each cheek, one and then the other gripping the mirror's edges to pull themselves free. What unfolded next was mesmerizing? No, wait, it was more entrancing? Biblical? Transcendent? I don't even know what to say. I lack the words, even these 20-odd years later, to describe those breathless moments, watching as a divine being pulled itself into our reality, a shitty little mirror acting as its mother, as anything other than life-changing is doing a disservice to you and my experience both. The way that the supernatural and the inescapably mundane entwined in what could only be called a birth showed the unimaginable fragility of our reality, our universe, or maybe our perception of it, was not fit to contain this divinity of white wax, her feminine nude form both wrongly pale and perfectly shaped in a way that made me jealous and left me aching in equal measure. She, of course it was a she, to call her anything else would be barbaric and uncouth, stepped off the mirror with a gracefulness that felt as if the world moved around her instead of her moving through it. She reached down and plucked up the leaf and feather from the mirror's surface, examining them both with appraising but thankful eyes. Carefully, she placed the leaf into the wax that made up her hair. And as simply as that, reality was unwritten. She had never had a wax simulacrum of hair. No. She had always had locks of bouncy red hair, befitting some Celtic princess in a fairy tale. My mind tried to hold on to the memory of her white wax hair, but the thought was as slippery as a dream upon waking, and I was soon left merely marveling at the beauty of her. It is only now, so far removed from the events, that I can recall all these little things that had flooded my mind, that had tried to warn me. She examined the feather more closely than the leaf. Inside her dark, forest green eyes flickered candles' flames. They weren't bright, but they were impossible to miss, shining narrow beams of dim light onto whatever she looked upon. She whispered to the feather, then snapped her wrist and sent it flying into the air. Feathers, hundreds of them drifting across my peripheral vision, broke me out of the hypnotic trance her beauty had pulled me into. Ink black, but casting rainbow shimmers, they rained from far above. They fell slowly from a night sky of crimson and stars that twinkled black against the alien hue. I had missed the shifting of our night sky, though I had no doubt it was further work of her, surely done with some flick of her wrist, inverting of the very fabric of reality to better suit her aesthetic, if nothing else. The feathers spiraled around our circle like lazy snowflakes, some dissolving when they touched the ground while the rest gathered around her, forming into an iridescent dress of well-oiled raven feathers. Bariga had answered our call. But what were we meant to do now? Leo tried to speak. His lips parted and shaped the words, but all that came was a fog of white breath. No sound. It wasn't that his words were muted. It seemed he couldn't form them at all. My hand found his and squeezed gently. He returned the squeeze, and I felt him trembling as much as I was. I hadn't even known I was shaking until then. The pale silver light bled up from the mirror once more and clung to her shoulders and the edges of her flame-red hair, and it pulled behind her skull, forming a flowing ring of physical light. It was almost a halo. If a halo could rot. No, not a halo. No, it was a crown. Yes, that's it. Crown. A massive circuit that dictated her divine rule, which I can still see to this day when I close my eyes, and that whirling current of liquefied silver light, things began to materialize. Raven feathers like those that spun behind her and formed her dress, but wet-looking, like the kind you can only see on birds after a flight they barely survived, bloodstain hidden by the blackness of themselves. Between the feathers hung green leaves from countless species of trees, each formed in the silvery current, aged through the colors of autumn before crumbling apart and sprouting black spots of mold in real time, only to grow into another, different leaf. They spun in the flow, going through their birth and death in a single breath, over and over. All of it moved together in a tight circle, like rings of some celestial body, and she stood calmly, the crown of her head acting as a center to this ominous display. We were kneeling, though, even today with all the memories I have recovered. I don't remember doing so, in a busted corner of a neighborhood court, and she was wearing the very manifestation of cycles of ruin like casual jewelry. KK's eyes were wild and animalistic. Sorry, I was opening the chat because I messed it up. KK's eyes were wild and animalistic, open too wide with tears freely streaking down her pale cheeks. A thin line of scarlet painted from the corner of her lip to her chin where she had bitten through her lip. Richie had an equally crazed look in his eyes. However, KK's fear was replaced with a lustful hunger that I couldn't have ever imagined on the boy's face before that moment. He stood as if he would rush forward to offer himself up to the nude goddess if his girlfriend weren't gripping his hand so tight that blood also trickled from where her fingernails had dug into the back of his hands. The flicker of recognition on her faces told her enough. She made a small motion with her hand, like she was brushing something foul off her palm, and sighed again. And then the displeasure was gone, and she was grinning once more. Ah, little ones. It is not your fault that you were reared with such contemptible tongues. Allow me the pleasure of introducing myself. Mariga, I am, she announced like the crack of a well-worn whip. It carried the cadence of a well-rehearsed stage line, yet was still being spoken by a true queen. The becoming at dusk, Mariga, I am. First devourer of false selves, one written in falling feathers and fading faces. Mariga, I am. 3 times I have spoken it, for I am Mariga, and you know it to be. I am Mariga, bearer of the mirror of dusk, unraveler of borrowed names, washer of the bloody rags, dresser of the lost in their true skins, wise beyond our years, young blood for kneeling as you prostrate yourself before all the futures past and all futures deaths. KK let out a tiny whimper. Mariga's eyes darted to her, kindled with a playful spark. Be at peace, bright match, the woman cooed. What reason is such a bright future with me? Bright match? KK stiffened further, breath catching under her direct attention. She was completely paralyzed, except for her eyes flickering between Mariga and me. With all of the patience of a noble woman, Mariga turned her candle flame eyes from KK and focused them onto Richie. His arm had moved protectively in front of KK. Despite the intensity of his yearning looks, the being gave a delighted chuckle. Not cruel, more like an amused aunt. And the warrior with no field, lost in this civilized world. Would you ask me to find you a battle to die glorious in? Richie's jaw clenched. I saw confusion flash across his face. What could she mean by calling him a warrior? She moved only her head, and those burning eyes fell upon Leo and me, our hands still clasped. The lion and the other, she murmured towards us. Your curiosity was enough, and your need to understand. She paused, as if noticing something, and yet her body shifted through reality to bring its full majesty upon us, her words cascading over me directly. Also the collar. She tilted her head. The raven feathers that her hair swept over shifted into red and orange leaves before rippling back to their original form. Dearest outsider, you lit this past candle and will still refuse to taste of its heat? A flush of shame climbed my neck. It was as if she knew that even as I summoned her, I'd feared what she might know me. My lips moved soundlessly. I had no answer. A faint smell of ozone and old paper reached me, and my stomach turned. Leo found his voice first, or perhaps she simply allowed him to speak now. You answered us, he said, awestruck. Mariga. The being clicked her tongue softly. I so love Halloween, she mused, almost to herself. All you hopeful souls playing at fear and desire. She glided forward, or rather, the world moved around her. One moment she was above the mirror, and then she was nearly pressed against Leo, as if space had folded the distance between them into non-existence. Change is lost, she whispered, the leaves of her crown all blackened to dust at once, leaving only their stems, and loss is nourishment. The brittle stems sprouted back into greenery at her words, falling back into their chaotic, desynchronous pattern. She made a circular gesture, and suddenly there lay a large oval mirror in her arms, cradled as one might hold a beloved child. The book had spoken of this, called it the Mirror of Dusk. The text had referred to it as regalia, its surface swirled with musky dusk light, as if a piece of twilight sky had been captured in silver glass. Keke swallowed audibly. What are you going to do to us? She asked in a small voice. Mariga arched an eyebrow. To you? Little match, I am here because you asked. You seek a kindness, do you not? To glimpse what you might become. She placed a hand at the top of the mirror's curve, her fingers drumming lightly on the silver edge of the regalia. I offer nothing more than a reflection. Leo immediately stepped forward. I'll do it, he said. Leo, I grabbed for his arm with my other hand, but stopped short. I was instinctively scared for him, some part of me wanting to flee from the side of that mirror. Sammy, it's okay. His hand slipped from mine as he moved nearer to Mariga. This is what we came for, right? KK, voice trembling but determined, laced her fingers with Richie's and stepped forward too. I'll look. Richie? Richie was shaking his head. I don't like this. But when KK's fingers squeezed his, he drew in a breath and managed a curt nod. He wouldn't abandon her. Fine, I'm in. Mariga seemed pleased. As it should be. Leo, KK, and Richie stepped closer to Mariga, forming a small triangle before her. The tall mirror of dusk shifted in her arms, and its surface began to glow with a dull inner light. Mariga lifted the mirror of dusk, and the surface woke. It wasn't glass anymore. It moved like slow water in a cave mouth. The light in it was wrong, dusk light that had weight. Our faces came back to us in slices. KK's eyes hung alone in the dark for a moment, bright and floating. No body under them. Leo's mouth hovered where his jaw should have been. Richie's shoulders flickered in and out like a bad signal. The mirror rippled and steadied, and you could feel it looking back. Mariga held it easy against her body, like you'd settle a child on your hip. Her hair carried a thin, circling glow, a broken crown of feathers and bone. Little faces swelled and sank in it, then smoothed again. Her eyes were kind. Look, she said. Leo stepped first. KK and Richie moved with him. It was like a rope around the ribs, pulling all three forward. Their names were already in her mouth, and she hadn't even said them. I think she's gonna kill them. Yeah, I'm hooked. I'm really loving this. I love like ritual pastas, for lack of a better word. Oh my god. I stayed where I was. That is a line everything cracked on, and I ever played it so many times I could draw it in chalk from memory. Leo, KK, Richie leaning toward the mirror in one breath, me planted behind them with my fists clenched and my throat tight. The truth is simple. They looked, and I did not. The world changed on that choice. Leo glanced over his shoulder at me right before it started. His mouth twitched up like he was about to tell me it was fine, like we were still only kids in an empty lot behind the rec center on Halloween night. Then he turned his face to the mirror. All three of them saw. The first sound was KK. It wasn't fear. Not at first. It was this tiny, soft breath through her teeth, like wonder. Her eyes were wide and wet. Her body leaned in, hungry. Her lips moved fast, whispering to something inside the mirror. I couldn't make out the words, but I could read the shape of pleading. Please, I'll do it, please. I can be her, please remember me. Her skin started to change. Not to burn. It didn't bubble like fire. It thinned, it sped. That's the only way I can tell it. The mirror pulled time through her like thread through a needle. Color rushed to her cheeks and drained. The soft curve of her face sharpened. Her mouth collapsed in on itself like she had lost teeth and bone. Deep tracks opened down from the corners of her eyes, salt cut and permanent, like she had cried for years and worn grooves in her own face. KK aged in front of me, fast-forwarded to the end. Her shoulders shook. Breath tore in and out of her in quick, broken pulls. She lifted one shaking hand toward whatever she saw in there. Her hair, still caught in that dumb little pumpkin scrunchie she grabbed from the dollar bin, streaked gray. The sound that came out of her then was too big for her throat. Not terror. Grief. Raw, body-deep grief that didn't belong to a 12-year-old. Like watching her future die and not being able to follow it. Richie didn't ease into it. He went to war the instant his eyes met the dusk. His whole frame snapped rigid, every muscle locked. His jaw clenched so hard I heard the grind. He lifted his hands like he was already mid-grapple. That was him all the way down. Richie fought every problem he met, because his body made sense to him in a way words didn't. There was nobody in front of him. Still, he braced for impact. The tendons in his neck stood out. His voice blew out of him, lower than his real voice had any right to be. No! He rattled like there was gravel in his lungs. Something hit him, hard. His head flew to the side like he'd taken a bat to the cheek. Blood sprayed the cracked court. His nose flattened. His cheekbone dented in a way bone shouldn't dent. His jacket tore at the back seam like his shoulders had outgrown it by years in a breath. Then more hits. From angles that didn't exist, you could see the force ripple through him, shoulders to spine. You could see the air leave him each time. His lips split, teeth clattered across the concrete. Spit and red pooled under his chin and dripped. Richie thrashed and swung at enemies that weren't there. He wasn't seeing the lot anymore. He was seeing whatever future the mirror laid in front of him, the fight he'd never walk away from. KK and Richie were both screaming now. Leo made no sound at all. That scared me worse than the blood. Leo's face had gone slack. Calm. Too calm. His breathing had shortened to tiny, measured sips, like the way you breathe in church when you're trying not to cry. His eyes held steady on the mirror, and I swear I saw two Leos in that glow. One older, bright, lying by people, easy in his own skin. One empty, same face, same perfect smile, but no light behind the eyes. Nothing in him but pose. His mouth parted. He leaned in. That was the moment something in me snapped from shock and emotion. Stop looking, I yelled. The air on the mirror felt thick, like wet cloth, so I don't know how loud it landed. My legs were already moving. Thought came later. I went for them. KK was the closest. I grabbed the shoulders of her jacket and yanked back with everything I had. Skin slid in my hands. I need to tell this straight. I have no reason to dress it up. My fingers closed on denim, and then there was a give, slick and warm, like peeling fruit. I staggered, horrified. She didn't even flinch toward me. She kept talking to the mirror, begging it, promising it as her knees gave. The last of the color left her face. Her breath hitched and then shuddered out. She folded to the ground like a marionette with the strings cut. I did not check for a pulse. I couldn't force myself to touch her again. I still see that pumpkin scrunchie when I close my eyes. I keep it clean in memory on purpose. I spun on Richie. He was still on his feet, somehow. Eyes wild, chest heaving like his ribs were cracked and the air had to fight the bone to get in. One arm hung loose at a bad angle. Blood kept bubbling at his mouth like his lungs were filling. Richie, I said. I grabbed at his good arm and pulled. Come on. His body would not move. It wasn't strength pinning him. I felt like the mirror had a hook in his spine. His muscles twitched under my hands, trying to follow orders that weren't mine. He looked at me for a split second, past the pain, past the rage. There was relief in it, like he was glad I was there. Then his legs went. He pitched forward face first, didn't even throw his hands out, hit the concrete hard and stayed down. KK's body was face down near the faded free throw line. Richie lay twisted on his side, jaw wrecked, jaw still leaking. The only one still upright was Leo. Leo, swaying in place in front of Mariga like he belonged to her. All that was left in me tunneled on him. I stopped trying to share the save. I went for Leo with everything I had left. I slammed my shoulder into his ribs. I wrapped both arms around his waist and wrenched him sideways like I was ripping a root out of packed dirt. He weighed more than he should have. Dead weight heavy. His gaze held on the mirror to the last inch. Then his eyes broke from it. The air tore. That's how it felt. Like a magnet ripped off iron. His hiss rolled off the glass, wet and angry, like breath through teeth. The dusk light in the mirror guttered. Leo's body collapsed on top of me. My knees hit concrete. My palm jammed under the back of his skull so it wouldn't slam. Pain sparked up my wrist. It didn't matter. His eyes rolled white. A low sound leaked out of him, somewhere between a moan and a lost animal. His pulse fluttered past against my arm. He was breathing. That was the only thing in the world that mattered in that second. He was breathing. The lot snapped back into regular night. The sick light around the mirror was gone. Puddles were only puddles again. You could hear the normal sounds of Halloween on our block. Kids laughing down on Maple, bass through somebody's cracked car window, a dog barking in a yard. The chalk circle we had drawn for her offering had been scuffed out under our sneakers. Sorry, I think my stream crashed for a second. So reconnection successful. Man, I'm really, really loving this. And I think like we all have a little bit that we can learn from writing like this. And I'll skip the most amazing parts of the story, like the characterization of each of the characters and just the horror and how well written the descriptions are, but just the super small niche things that you might not really think about. Like just a few paragraphs ago, when he wrote about the fading three throw line, right? It's just those small little moments where we're kind of referencing the fact that, you know, he mentioned that this tennis court used to be a basketball court, and we're calling back to that. It's just showing that he really has this story in his head. He can visualize it, and this world exists outside of this little story. These characters really exist to the writer, and so they exist to us, right? Hey Tina, have a good night. I appreciate you coming out. Really, really glad you were able to make it for some of this. Mariga still stood over us. Her body blocked the streetlight, so her face sat in half shadow. Close up, she looked almost gentle. Her dress moved like raven wings. All black shine and layered feathers. Her crown still turned slow over her brow, built from bone and branch and pale wax faces that smelled and melted. Dust clung to her like a held breath. She looked at KK on the concrete. She looked at Richie. She looked at Leo draped across my lap, my arms around him. Her mouth curved in a way I hate myself for remembering as kind. Little caller, she said. Her voice stroked the air like a lover's touch that felt so wrong in this context. Warm, loving. You would take back what you gave me? My throat was raw. My eyes burned. I couldn't force a word out past it. She studied me, head tilted, no anger in it, only interest, like I was an entry in a field journal. Bold, she said. We will meet again. Then she leaned down fast and pressed her mouth to Leo's forehead. No ritual words, no light show, a kiss, simple as a mother's. If a mother could rewrite bone. Leo's back arched against me like he'd been shocked. His hands jerked, his eyes flew open and then rolled back. A sound tore out of him that didn't sound like any language I knew. I tightened my hold. My heart jammed so hard it hurt. When I blinked, Mariga was gone. Not smoke. Not a dramatic exit. She was there one heartbeat and gone the next. And the mirror of dusk was gone with her. Her cold had already started to lift from the air. The lot felt like any dead-end tennis court would. If you ignored the 2 bodies on the ground and the smear of blood across the concrete, you could pretend nothing had happened. I screamed. My throat was already wrecked, but I screamed anyway. The sound tore up through a cracked voice and dry mouth and spilled into the night. I screamed KK's name. I screamed Richie's name. I screamed for help. A porch light flared in the yard across the street from the community center. A man's voice called out, annoyed first, and sharp. "Who's out there? Hey, you kids okay?" His voice changed halfway through the word okay. He had heard what I had. I dragged Leo towards the man's fence. His legs wouldn't hold him properly. They did little more than help him stumble in the direction I moved him, before giving out at the edge of the fence. His eyes were open to slits, but empty all the same. The pupils tracked toward the porch light, slow, unfixed, like a newborn. No focus, no recognition. "Wake up," I hissed in his ear. My voice was blown and shaking. "Leo, wake up. Please wake up." A sound bubbled out of him. Then, not speech. I hooked my hands under his armpits and hauled him. My wrists shrieked. My ribs burned. The concrete was slick. My sneakers slid in Richie's blood, and I almost went down. Caught myself on the fence at my shoulder. Kept moving. My chest felt like it was caving in around my heartbeat. The man from the porch was already at the fence now. He stopped dead when he saw Leo's face. Oh God, Janet!" he yelled over his shoulder without taking his eyes off us. "Call 911. "I'm here," I told him, oblivious to the world now that I knew help would be coming. "I'm not going anywhere." My throat tightened around the next part. I forced it out anyway. "We called her together," I said. The words tasted like rust. "I know this is on me. I know it is. I'm not going to sit right here with you. I'm going to sit right here with you until you're ready to talk again. I'm going to make this right." His eyelashes fluttered. It could have been a reflex. It could have been nerves firing under the skin. It felt like more than that to me. I squeezed his hand. His fingers twitched. Barely. The smallest curl. That was enough to keep me upright in that chair and breathing. It was also the moment the promise stopped being a wish and turned into an oath. Wow. That was good. I'm especially drawn by the line, "I'm going to make this right." And then the fact that that promise turned into an oath. It makes me think that there's something more to this, which perhaps there is. So this is a Bitterverse Halloween story. And this is, at least in some sense, in a way that I'm not entirely clear on, connected to Augustus's novel, The Bitter Question, which you can find by typing !Augustus in the chat. It's connected to some extent, so I am curious if we get any answers as to how he tries to make this right, or anything along those lines, because I really enjoyed that. A follow on next Halloween. Cool, man. You're giving us quite a wait for that. Makes me think of Pluribus, which I just finished, and they're taking a 2-year gap for season 2 to come out, which is fucking ridiculous. But yeah, I know. My brain. I know Sammy's a she, but since you're the writer and I know you're a guy, it's writing in first person. Sometimes my brain switches, but no, man, that was terrific. I love ritual pastas, as I like to call them. But I think that calling it a ritual pasta is almost a disservice. But I just love horror stories where the center is a group of kids or a person in particular doing a ritual, because it's something that I think connects really well with people, especially when it's something that potentially readers could go and do on their own. Even if they don't actually go out and do it, it has that idea in your head like this is so realistic. There's clear steps that they took to get to that point. You can imagine yourself going out and doing it. So it works really well. I think the only comment I would have is that it moved slowly for Reddit. And that's not even a negative comment. That's just a very neutral, like, this moved a little bit slowly for a Reddit story, but probably the perfect pacing for a short story within a collection or a short story on a literary journal. It had like very strong pacing, but maybe what some people would consider too slow for Reddit. That being said, I don't think that this is too good to do well on Reddit. I think it's a little unlucky that it didn't do well. But also posting it under the title, The Bitter Youth, I think that's a good title for a short story. But if you're trying to get views on Reddit, the title would have to be something like, on Halloween, me and my friends did a ritual. Three of them died, or something that's like pretty stupid like that is what would actually get views on Reddit. And secondly, I think that the fact that it's posted on the Creepcast subreddit is doing it a disservice. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is I think posting it in Creepcast or Tales from the Creep, nothing really does. Stories never really do well on those subreddits unless you have really cool art attached to it. I think I'm curious, Augustus, if you're able to answer, why wasn't this posted in, say, the No Sleep subreddit? I've noticed you don't really post anything there, but as far as I know, I think this would fit the rules there really well. And I think this could do well there. Yeah, no, I know. But I feel like this would fit well on No Sleep. I feel like it fits the rules. And with like a very clickbaity title, it could do well there. Because I don't think this is too well written to do. I don't think anything is too well written. Yeah, no, that's cool. I honestly wish I had your morals because I'm against the No Sleep subreddit. I don't support the No Sleep subreddit as a organization, if you want to call it that, but I know that it's the best place to get your stuff seen. So I still do post there. Yeah, so I got banned on the No Sleep subreddit on an old account. An account where I had like multiple 2,000 upvote or 1,000 upvote stories. I got banned because I got 3 stories deleted in the same month, and they said that I was trolling, which is like ridiculous. But yeah, no, I wish I had your morals with that. But I know that as far as places to post your work for free, that promise became an oath. Yeah. As far as places to post your work for free, there's no better place than No Sleep in terms of pure readership. But yeah, no, I don't think anything is too well written to do good on Reddit. I think the place where you have to compromise on quality is with the title. And so in theory, which I know that you're against posting on the No Sleep Reddit, so you're not going to do that. But in theory, if this were posted on No Sleep with a clickbaity title like, like Jwick, I don't know how to pronounce your name, so let me know if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Like Jwick said, I got my friends to do a ritual that killed them. Then I think it could do well there. But then there's also the chance, no matter how good it is, that it just gets buried, right? If you post it at the wrong time. Because I'm telling you, I've written stories that got over 1,000 upvotes that I wrote in 30 minutes. And I've posted stories that got 20 upvotes that I took a month to write, right? So it's so much luck involved. Jaywalk. It's so much luck involved, but like the left right game is a good example of something that's like super well written and actually caught on. Whereas there are some posts, like I would argue, the top upvoted No Sleep story, which is My Sugar Daddy Asked Me for Weird Favors. I would argue that that one is not that well written, but it has, it's very clickbaity and it works well as a short story. I think that you can do well whether the writing is strong or it's not. I don't think having strong writing works against you or anything. I'm hoping that Tales from the Creeps can grow to what No Sleep is. The problem is, I think there's a Skinwalker dating site. That will get you banned. Yep, Augustus, you are exactly right. You have to, so I have some, maybe at some point I'll talk about this. I have a little bit, maybe not insider knowledge to the No Sleep subreddit, but I have some experience that I think if I talked about a little bit would give some context to why the No Sleep subreddit is the way that it is. Yeah, Sylv. I do think I could provide some context that that would explain a little bit why it is the way that it is, specifically around their head mod. But I probably don't want to say too much just now because I don't want to risk getting banned yet. But no, I think Tales from the Creeps has potential to become a large subreddit. The issue is that the majority of people on Tales from the Creeps are writers and not readers. And so I think everyone wants to post their stories. No one wants to read other people's stories. And that needs to change. The thing with No Sleep is that it used to be a pinned or an auto subreddit. So it has so many subscribers who didn't actually go out and look for No Sleep. They're just were casually subscribed to the subreddit because when they made an account, they were auto subscribed. So if a catchy title pops up, they're more likely to click on it. Whereas Tales from the Creeps, the only people that are subscribed are the people that actually sought it out. And in most cases, the people that sought that out were writers rather than readers. So I'm not sure what the solution is, but I think that's the main reason why Tales from the Creeps doesn't have the sheer audience size that No Sleep does. Not sure what the solution is. Yeah, we need to, the rules need to change. I can do a whole story time event about why I think that subreddit became the way that it is. I'll probably save that for another time, but it's yeah. The problem is when moderators have nothing better to do than have arbitrary rules that are very subjective. It causes huge issues. And I'm okay with some of the rules, right? Like they can be more strict than Tales from the Creeps if they want to be. Like they can be first person only and everything is real even if it's not, right? I don't necessarily agree with those rules, but I'm not a mod, right? I think if they want to have those rules, that's cool. But then when it's like acceptable type of horror, you can't say you can't give a real location, things like that. It's really sad. I need to like I'll talk about it. I'll talk about it at some point. Maybe next stream. I'm not gonna lie. So this can make me sound like an alcoholic. Guys, I rarely drink. I drink maybe once a month. But for whatever reason, I drank a little bit before last stream, and then I drank a little bit today. And I'm probably going to stop drinking as much. Not that I drink a lot, but I'm a little too tipsy to give a logical explanation. So, probably next time when I'm completely sober, I'll talk about it a little more, where I can like, yeah. Well, don't worry, I'm not going to become an alcoholic. I think last time, well, I'll be honest with you guys. I don't think you're going to judge me. I've never streamed before my last stream. That was my first time streaming, so I was a little bit nervous. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to drink a little bit just to be a little loose and chill for the stream. And then today I was like, I'm a little less nervous, so I'm going to drink less, but I'm going to drink a little bit. So I drank again. But genuinely, I drink maybe once a month. And even then I usually don't get drunk. So probably next stream and the next few streams will be sober streams, and I'll be a little more, not that I'm incoherent right now, but I think I'll be a little more able to formulate my thoughts. But since I already started, like, I'm gonna finish this. Buzzballs are like a TikTok meme, but they're pretty good. Like, I'm embarrassed to like bring buzzballs when I go to parties and stuff, but like, they're pretty good. Yeah. But anyway, that was a great story. I personally, I want to write a ritual story where someone is doing a ritual for a specific reason. Very similar to this story. But it's a hard type of story to write because it's been done so many times. It's hard to stay away from those tropes. I think Augustus did a fantastic job of following the pattern of ritual stories, but then also breaking the pattern and making it into his own. And I am scared of doing that, but not breaking the pattern in the way that he did. And so it's hard, but he did a good job. I have about 12,000 words written for a ritual story that I wrote maybe like 6 months ago and never finished. This is making me want to go back to it. It's completely different. Like the people are college age. It's only like 2 characters. But this is kind of inspiring me to go back and finish that. And I hope that I can write it as strongly as he did here. I'm excited to read the bitter question. This is the last time I'm gonna, well, maybe at the end of the stream I'll talk about it one more time. But again, exclamation point Augustus in the chat, you can find this book. And I imagine it is relatively similar to the 2 stories we just read from him. The art, even inside the book, is really nice. The foreword is very well written. And it's only about 200 pages, so it's easy enough that you could read this in one day. So definitely suggest looking for it and buying it if you're interested, or at the least, you know, checking out the rest of his stuff on Reddit. Yeah, I was thinking about that, Augustus, but I didn't have a chance to ask you if it was okay before I started, so I didn't. But I'll probably do that either at the end of this stream, now that you've mentioned it, or at the beginning of my next stream, because I do need to wrap up around 10 tonight. So I only have about an hour and a half left. So if I have the time, I'll do it. If not, probably next stream. But the foreword is really nice, and it adds some context to his writing in general. Thank you, Augustus. I appreciate that. Yeah, birds, the cover is really nice. Whoever did the art really knew what they were doing. Alrighty, so we're gonna go ahead and jump into the next story by Sylv. little bit of context on this one. So Sylv commented on my original post when I was asking for stories to read on stream, and I ended up not having time to get to her story on that first stream. But it was something that, like, just the name Project Nightcrawler made me super interested in it. So I was definitely like, I had it in the back of my mind that, like, hey, when I stream again, I'm going to try to do this story. She has the full novel written and published on Reddit. And if you go to the schedule, you can find that. And I have it linked on there. I should have made a command for her, but the story is, Project Nightcrawler, Echoes of the Past, and she has the whole novel published on Reddit. I'm going to be reading the first 2 parts today, but if you're interested in the rest, you can go to her Reddit username, Sylv_x_x, and read the rest off stream. As far as I'm aware, there's not a physical book, at least at this time, but as far as I know, there's not a physical book at this time, but still, I think she'd probably really appreciate if you were at least able to go and check out the whole thing. So I'll go ahead and show you the cover to the book. Right. Project Nightcrawler. I think the art is really nice. I think it's really, really beautiful. So if you enjoy my reading of the story, go check out the full novel on her Reddit. And I think it's really, really cool. Let me go ahead and find the full link. Okay. I think the cover art is really, really cool. I like that I'm loving the fact that, like, you guys have art for your work and it's not AI. That is honestly, like, inspiring to me. I am someone who, like, I'm like so anti-AI when it comes to creating art. And so and I've had, like, some doubts in the community and how people are using so much AI for everything. And to see you guys being creative and doing all this great work without the use of AI, I really love it. So just keep that in mind. Check out the rest of her novel if you enjoy this part 1. I'm going to go ahead and get to reading the first 2 parts. Let me just edit this really quick. Alrighty. Project Nightcrawler, Echoes of the Past, Part 1. Warning, this story contains body horror, gore, human experimentation, and spooky vibes. It's a multi-part story. Like I said, she's turning it into a book. And you can follow her on Reddit for more updates, and of course to read the rest of the novelization of this series. Some secrets stay buried. At the Ironwood Asylum, one of them still breathes. Rain lashed against the grimy apartment windows, streaking the glass with silvery tears. Inside, a small boy knelt on the floor, clutching a pink threadbare blanket to his face. The fabric smelled faintly of lavender and perfume. He pressed it as close as he could, as if it could somehow bring her back. His mother was gone, the way his small mind could barely comprehend the sight of her lifeless body, and how the world had moved on, leaving only the echo of her voice in his ears and the hollow ache in his chest. A knock at the door startled him, but he didn't move. The social worker's gentle voice called through. "Elliot, honey, we need to take you somewhere safe." Somewhere safe. The words felt empty. He shook his head, burying it deeper in the blanket, inhaling her scent once again. From behind her, 2 men in black coats waited. One of them stepped forward to reach for him, and he flinched. "You can take it with you," the man spoke. Elliot didn't speak. He only nodded, clinging tighter onto the blanket as he was guiding at the door and into the back of a police car. The drive was silent. Rain poured on the car roof. Both men looking back into the rearview mirror to see the boy's distant expression. When they arrived at the imposing building of his father, Elliot's stomach twisted. The man who had abandoned him now stood waiting. From the patrol car, the asylum looked dead. From the man standing at its entrance, it looked claimed. Officer Barnes slowed the cruiser as I rolled past the iron gates, headlights washing over the figure near the front steps. "That him?" he asked, nodding toward the building. Officer Klein leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. "Has to be." The man stood with his hands in his coat pockets, long brown hair hanging loose around his shoulders, stirring slightly in the cold air. Everything about him blended into the place. The brown of his coat, the dirt-stained trousers, even the way he didn't seem to notice the patrol car watching him. Or maybe he noticed and didn't care. "The guy looks like he hasn't slept in weeks," Barnes muttered. "You see his eyes?" Klein did. Even from this distance, they caught the light, hazel and sharp, cutting straight through the glass as if the car weren't there at all. Not startled, not nervous, just assessing. "He's got custody now, right?" Barnes asked. "Kid's mother was murdered." Klein smacked his shoulder, speaking in a hushed tone. "Lower your voice, Barnes. He's still here." "But yeah," Klein said. "And Child Services assigns him over to this place." He shook his head. "Hell of a home." The man turned slightly, a profile catching the headlights. Scruff shadowed his jaw, giving him a feral, unpolished look. Less like a doctor and more like someone who lived off bad habits and worse ideas. When he moved, it was with purpose. No wasted motion. Barnes frowned. "You get the feeling he fits this place a little too well?" Klein snorted. "Feels like the asylum didn't corrupt him. Feels like it just found him." The man glanced toward the building's doors, where Elliot now climbed out the back seat. Brown clothes, small frame, clutching the pink blanket to his chest. The father didn't reach for the child. He simply turned and walked inside, the doors closing behind him with a dull, final thud. Barnes exhaled. "Kid's not going to make it out of here the same." Klein started the engine again, unease settling in his gut. "Something tells me the kid's not the one we should be worried about." The cruiser pulled away, headlights fading. The asylum swallowed the rest. "Elliot," his father said, voice distant. "Come inside." The boy didn't respond. He clutched the blanket to his chest, imagining his mother's hands in the folds. Soon the door closed behind them with a hollow click. The boy's lips pressed into the fabric. "I'll never forget you." The house was vast, orderly, and painfully quiet. Definitely not a child's comfort. A faint scent of disinfectant lingered in the air, replacing the lingering lavender of his baby's blanket. His father's gaze was sharp and calculating, as he led Elliot down a narrow hallway. "This'll be your room," he said, his voice flat, pointing towards a small door at the end of the hall. "Go on pack and stay put." Elliot hesitated. The room was clean, neat, almost pristine, but it felt like a cage. The blanket against his chest was the only thing that smelled like home. He hugged it close, as if it could shield him from the foreign walls and the stranger who claimed to be his father. "You'll sleep here," the man continued. "I expect order. No crying and no noise. I have work to attend to." Elliot's small hands tightened around the blanket. He simply nodded, retreating into the corner of the room. He had soft brunette hair that never stayed neat, no matter how often it was brushed, and dark brown curls that fell into his eyes when he looked down, which was often. His face was narrow, gentle, and still rounded with youth. There was nothing sharp about him. His eyes were green, not bright or striking. It was the kind of green that reflected whatever light was nearest, as if he were always absorbing the world instead of pushing back against it. He dressed in brown most days. Plain trousers, a sweater a size too big, shoes that scuffed easily against the floor, colors chosen to blend in, to not be noticed. The asylum like children that disappeared into their surroundings. That's a really great characterization, not just of Elliot, but of the asylum itself. I've noticed the two writers that we've read from today are both very strong with descriptions, and that is something that you don't see a lot on Reddit. And so it's something that's making me really enjoy you guys' work. And so good job with that, guys. I really liking that. But the blanket never did. It was once his mother's. It was pink and worn with time. The threads were frayed, edges unraveling, the fabric soft from years of being clutched too tightly. It stood out against the muted browns. When the father left, the door clicked behind him, leaving Elliot in the quiet. The boy pressed his back against the wall. He imagined his mother's face over the folds of fabric, remembering the gentle hum she would sing when tucking him in, pulling him into a much-needed slumber. The next morning, the boy's father led him down a wide corridor lined with polished floors and a strong antiseptic scent that seemed to cling to everything in the asylum. Elliot's small fingers clutched the blanket. At the end of the hallway, a woman waited. She was dressed simply, her coat neatly buttoned, and her eyes carried a soft warmth. She wore red-rimmed glasses, her black hair up in a neat swirled bun. "This is Nurse Marin," his father said. "She'll be responsible for your care here. You will listen to her." The nurse stepped forward slowly, crouching so her face was closer to his level. "Hello, Elliot," she said gently. "I've heard a lot about you, and have worked alongside your father for years now. I promise I'll take good care of you." The child stared at her, unsure. Her voice was calm and soothing, but he didn't trust it yet. No one could replace the warmth he had lost. "May I see your room?" She spoke softly, gesturing toward the end of the hall. Elliot nodded slowly, still wary. She offered him her hand, and after a long pause, he placed his small fingers in hers. Her touch was gentle, and for a brief moment, he felt safe. Not like his mother, but a promise of stability. As they walked, she kept her tone soft, humming quietly under her breath, a tune that reminded him of the lullabies his mother used to sing. Elliot pressed a blanket against his face, closing his eyes, letting the faint warmth of her voice wrap around him. When they reached his room, Nurse Marin knelt beside him, smoothing the bed covers. "This must be a hard transition, but you won't be alone," she said. "You can keep your blanket here." I really like Nurse Marin. I think she is in contrast to the rest of the world here, and she's a soft, quiet character, and she seems to be caring, and that is something I think Elliot needs. So I really love that. Elliot nodded again, feeling the weight of the asylum press against him. The room was neat, tidy, and cold. But for the first time since his mother's death, he felt a spark of comfort, a fragile thread he could cling to. And somewhere, in the groans and moans of the hall, something watched him. Nurse Marin didn't notice it. She only smiled softly and said, "We'll take care of each other, Elliot. I promise." The next day, Nurse Marin led Elliot through the winding halls of the father's asylum, though he wouldn't yet know to call it that. To him, it still felt like a cage, a cold, towering one. "This way," she said softly, her hands lightly on his back. "There's a lot to see, but I'll be with you the whole time." As they turned a corner, they came to a double-sided row of metal cell doors, much like a prison. Through them, Elliot could see people moving. Figures crouched, shuffled, or pressed against the walls. Their eyes were wide, hollow, and unblinking. Some whimpered. Others muttered words he didn't understand. Who are they?" he asked. "These are patients," Nurse Marin said carefully, kneeling beside him so her face was level with his. "Some of them are sick. Some are a bit more unfortunate. But they're under care. Always under care." Elliot felt a shiver run down his spine. The figures behind the bars stared at him in silence, some tilting their heads in ways that felt unnatural. One shoved a pale, trembling hand through the bars. Elliot instinctively recoiled. "They won't hurt you," Nurse Marin said softly. "They're different, but they're not your concern. You just need to stay close to me." The boy peeked out from behind the nurse. The figures were like the children he remembered from school or the neighbors. Sorry, I was trying to read. I'm trying to read chat. Man. Not your concern. You just need to stay close to me. The boy peeked out from behind the nurse. The figures weren't like the children he remembered from school or the neighbors he had been outside. Their movements were jerky and uneven, as if their bodies didn't quite belong to them. Some were animalistic in their gestures, scratching, crouching, or twitching. "Why do they look like that?" he whispered. "Some are harder to treat," Nurse Marin said gently, her eyes flicking toward one of the cells with a faint tension. "Not everyone is lucky. Some don't get better the way we hope to achieve." "But you'll take care of me?" he asked, voice shaking. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'll keep you safe. I promise." Later throughout the week, Elliot sat on the edge of his small bed, clutching the blanket close to his chest. The day had been long, filled with strange corridors, flickering lights, and the haunting figures behind the metal bars. Nurse Marin had tried to reassure him, but nothing helped. A sharp knock on the door made him jump. His father's tall, imposing silhouette filled the doorway. His expression was hard and cold. "Elliot," he said, "that blanket. It's not suitable here. You don't need it." The boy froze. I need it," he whispered, clutching the fabric tighter. It's Mom." His father's eyes narrowed. "Your mother is gone. You're here now. That blanket, it keeps you from accepting reality. Give it to me." "No," Elliot's voice cracked. "Please, that's all I have." "Give it to me." The words were calm. Practice. Not unkind, but final. Elliot's shoulders hunched. He didn't look up. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor. The blanket trembled in his grip. I really like that. The taking the blanket away from him. Obviously terrible. I don't like it for Elliot. But taking that blanket away from him, it's almost like losing his mother again. And it's just another traumatic incident that's building his character while simultaneously really showing us how terrible the father is. And how terrible this asylum is. And I really like that. So I appreciate that. Elliot and his fuck-ass dad. Oh, man. The nurse stepped forward before she could stop herself. "Doctor," she said gently, lowering herself to the child's height. "It's just a blanket. Let him keep it for now. He's been through a lot. Familiar objects help with..." "It's a liability," his father interrupted. See, I love the characters in anything I read that stand up against bad people. She's standing up even against her boss in a situation where she knows she's not going to win, because it shows her good nature. It shows that she's a good person deep down. And it's nice to have a character who's not the main character who we can side with. Like, if Nurse Marin dies, I'm going to start crying. "It's a liability," his father interrupted, not even turning to face her. "Sentiment needs dependency." The nurse's mouth tightened. "He's a child. He's a subject," the father replied. "Crazy thing to say about your son." Elliot flinched at the word. The nurse reached out, carefully, as if approaching a frightened animal. "Elliot," she said softly, "it's okay. You don't have to give it up if you don't want to." For the first time, he looked up. Wow, "you don't have to give it up if you don't want to" is crazy to say in front of your boss. For the first time, he looked up. Hope flickered in his small, fragile eyes for a brief moment before his father's hand came down between them. "That's enough." He crouched, prying the blanket from his son's fingers one by one. The fabric resisted, stretching, as if it didn't want to leave either. Elliot made a small sound, not a cry, not a word, just a breath that broke in his chest. The nurse stood abruptly. "You're hurting him." His father finally looked at her, eyes cold and clinical. "You are here to assist, not to interfere." The blanket was gone, and the child's hand stayed curled as if it were still there. He stared at his empty palms, breathing too fast now, his whole body locked in place. The nurse watched as something changed in his eyes. Not anger, but something quieter. Something that sank inward and stayed. His father turned away, folding the blanket with methodical precision, already dismissing it as nothing more than excess material. "He'll forget it," he said. "Attachment fades when it's not indulged." So clinical, God. Behind him, the nurse knelt beside Elliot and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He didn't respond. He didn't cry, and he didn't move. Without another word, his father stepped out of the room. The scent of lavender, the only piece of his mother left, now faded as his father carried it out of the room. Nurse Marin stepped forward hesitantly after his father left, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "It's still yours, Elliot," she murmured. "It's just being kept safe for now." But he didn't believe her. The warmth, the memory, the connection to his mother. It was now gone. He curled up on the bed, hugging himself, imagining his mother's arms from the folds of the vanished blanket. And deep inside, a new sensation began to stir. In the silence of the room, the shadows of the asylum seemed to lean closer, as if the walls were listening. Days passed in a blur of cold routines and empty halls. Nurse Marin stayed close, offering gentle words and soft smiles. But Elliot's heart was no longer capable of accepting them. The blanket was gone, and with it, the last fragment of warmth from himself. Every word of reassurance felt like a lie. He watched her from the corners of the hallways, feeling the subtle shift in his stomach from anger and betrayal. She was kind, yes, but she wasn't her. His father's presence only deepened the bitterness. The man was cold and distant towards him and Elliot could feel the judgment in his gaze every time he faltered. He learned the halls before he learned the people. The asylum stretched endlessly. Its corridors blended and folded. The lights buzzed overhead, some flickering just enough to make the shadows twitch. His footsteps were small beneath the echo of distant groans, muttering voices, and the metallic clink of restraints. He walked behind his father. As he passed the cells, eyes followed him. Some of the patients pressed their faces to the narrow bars, mouths working silently. Others rocked back and forth, whispering to things only they could see. One man laughed when Elliot walked by, a sharp, broken sound that made him flinch. "Don't stop," his father had said earlier. "Don't stare." But he couldn't help it. He wondered if this was what happened when someone was unwanted long enough. Every locked door, every whispered order from his father spoke just out of earshot, as if he were already something less than human. He hated the way his father walked ahead of him, and never beside him. He hated how the staff listened to his father's voice, but spoke to him in slow, careful tones. He hated how the halls felt more familiar than the man who was supposed to protect him. That's a really good line of characterization for both of them. He hated the way his father walked ahead of him and never beside him. It's that his father feels that he's superior. It's making Elliot feel inferior. It's just those small things that show you that the author really understands this world. Yeah, it's a well-written character, even if we hate him, because we're supposed to hate him, right? He hated how the halls felt more familiar than the man who was supposed to protect him. At the end of one corridor, Elliot paused. Behind the celled bars, a woman sat on the floor, humming softly to herself. The tune was uneven, and it made his chest ache. It sounded almost like something his mother used to hum when she thought no one was listening. Elliot stood there longer than he should have. "Move," his father snapped from down the hall. Elliot obeyed, but hardened inside as he turned away. He realized then that the asylum wasn't just where his father worked. It was where his father belonged. And if this place was going to swallow him whole, he decided these halls would remember his footsteps for a very different reason. Oh man. At the quiet corners of the asylum, he began experimenting with small things, pressing lightly against the doors to see how much pressure they could bear, moving silently across the polished floors, holding his breath and listening to the hum of the vents. Every day he grew bolder. Each day the shadow of anger and cunning inside him stretched, testing its limits. And the more he explored, the more resentment towards Nurse Marin and the resentment towards Nurse Marin and his father deepened. They wanted to guide him, to keep him safe, but all he felt was trapped. So I'm a little confused, not in a bad way, but I'm a little bit confused about Nurse Marin, because he feels, it almost seems that he feels equal resentment towards Nurse Marin and his father, at least from the sentiment of this sentence. And I feel as though, Nurse Marin is an employee, and, she's doing her job, but she's trying to be good to the people of the asylum. Whereas his father seems like a genuinely evil person. But of course, this is a youth. This is a character in his youth. This is a young boy. He might not be able to make that distinction. But I'm hoping that he's able to understand the difference, or that Nurse Marin is able to prove the difference to him at some point. But this story is really starting to remind me of The Butcher by Joyce Carol Oates. She wrote it. It's like one of her newest novels, and she wrote it at the age of 83, but it is in an asylum, and it's very, very similar to this. But as if from the POV of the father of this story. So I think that book's definitely worth checking out. One evening, as the rain pounded against the windows, Elliot stopped outside a row of cell doors. He could hear faint muttering, whispered words that bounced off the walls. He pressed a hand against the cold metal. "They're like me," he whispered to himself. "I won't be trapped anymore," he murmured. "No one will trap me again." One night, Elliot stayed in the shadows of a hallway, just beyond the corner of his room, listening to the distant murmur of voices. His father's deep tone echoed first in a hushed tone. "We're running out of viable subjects. The last batch, they've all failed. They're unstable, uncontrollable, useless." A soft sigh followed. Nurse Marin replied, "We can't push the next one too soon. Another failure will draw attention. We've already skirted too close with the authorities." So, I'm gonna beat Nurse Marin's ass. I think she might not be what I thought. "Attention won't matter if we don't get results," he murmured. "We need more income, more funding. The project, it needs to succeed, Marin. If we don't have a suitable subject soon..." His words trailed off. Elliot listened in from the ventilation system. His small body shook with confusion. His father's obsession, the nurse's compliance, the cold, calculated cruelty, it all boiled in his young mind. He realized that no one would protect him, that the world he was in was a cage lined with people who only cared about their projects. Elliot's eyes burned in the dim light. His hands clenched. He backed silently into the corner, watching his father and Nurse Marin walk past. Elliot realized that he could free himself and the others if he stayed strong. He pictured his father. Approval had always been so rare. But if he played into the project, if he allowed himself to be tested, maybe, just maybe, his father would see him. The thought comforted him. It gave him purpose. A quiet, calculating calm settled over him. The grief and anger were still there, sharp and raw, but now they were fueled by determination. After a month of adapting to his surroundings, the asylum whispered secrets. They always had, and tonight they spoke in his father's voice. He crouched behind the half-open door of the laboratory, hidden in the shadows as the dim light cast a sickly glow over the room. Beakers steamed on the counter, the air sharp with antiseptic and the faint scent of blood. His father stood over a table littered with notes and glass jars. A few contained organs that twitched faintly, even outside the body. Others held translucent vials of green liquid that were faintly pulsing. Nurse Marin hovered nearby, her expression uneasy. "You're blending human and reptilian sequences again," she said quietly. "The last batch lost motor control. Their tissue didn't stop regenerating. It kept growing." His father's tone was detached. "Regeneration isn't a failure. It's an evolution. Lizards can shed their tails and regrow them at will. Why shouldn't we extend that to human tissue? Controlled rejuvenation means no decay and no death." He scribbled notes furiously, the quill scratching the paper. "But the issue isn't growth. It's the direction. That's where the canine strand comes in." Marin frowned. "The sensory enhancement?" Sensory enhancement as the last line of the story. That is really interesting. And so it's a good thing that we have part 2 and then the rest of the book to jump into. Let me find that part 2. Okay. So there's 6 parts to this. We're about to start reading part 2. I really enjoyed that. I really like that. I think a very hard thing to do when it comes to starting a long work, and what a lot of books do that lose people, is when they spend too long describing the characters and building the world and all these things. Whereas this story, there was always plot moving forward from the very beginning, right? There was constant tension. We're worried about his mom, and then we're worried about the blanket, and then we're worried about the secrets. And we're getting all the characterization in the midst of all of this happening. It's working very well. And it kept me interested throughout that story, while also giving me enough to make me want to read the rest, right? So it works as a short story, but it also works as a part of a larger work, which I think is what chapters of a novel need to do. And so I think that was very well done. Which makes me read The Fragmented Youth. Okay. Yeah, I think so. I think so too, Birds. I'm happy with that. And I probably have more to say. I think there's places where there's like a few things that like I would probably change. Not just in that story, but in like everything I read. Like small changes, like things that would take 30 seconds to fix, right? Because it's all an opinion. But I have a few more stories to get through, and I need to be done around 10. So, I mean, the only thing I was really gonna say, so I'll say this super quickly, is like I almost think it could have hit harder if Nurse Marin, if Elliot trusted Nurse Marin and then felt betrayed when he heard her, because that's how I felt as a reader. But there was the line when I was confused about like, okay, why is he treating Nurse Marin as if she's just as bad as his dad? And it turns out she is, but Elliot didn't know that at that point in the story. So it's almost like I would have rather him been like, at least I have Nurse Marin on my side. And then a little bit later, he figures out like, oh shit, Nurse Marin isn't on my side. And that breaks him even more. And it also surprises us even more, right? But that's like such a small thing. Can I go to the bathroom? You can go to the bathroom, Nat. Go ahead. She's asking because she's going to have to walk through the room. So you'll see her in the back as she walks by. But no, that's like the thing, like, I'll say this, Sylv. The only thing the thing that I'm saying, the only reason that I would even like say that is because I'm invested in the story. And if I wasn't, then I wouldn't even like think about that, right? And 2, keep in mind that like if I give feedback like that, this is me reading it while drinking. And so someone else might completely disagree and they might be right, right? So always, like, if you get feedback like that from anyone, be like, do I agree? Like, do I hear that and agree, or do I hear that and disagree? And then if you disagree, you're probably right, right? So then you just ignore it. But if you agree, then you can, you know, do what you need to do. Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm saying is, like, I think it's good to get those outside point of views because, like I said, like, I might be completely wrong when I said that, right? Like, the story might be better without making that change, but you hear that, like, point of view, and then you can think about it, and it just gives you something to think about. And then you might say, like, oh, I disagree with him, I'm not going to change that. But at least you thought about it. And then you might be like, oh, I agree with that, I'm going to change that, right? So it's, as a writer, the goal is to take in as many different opinions as possible, and probably 90% of the opinions you hear are going to be fucking dumb and stupid, and you're not going to want to use them, even if you think the person who said it is smart, right? Like, it could be the greatest writer in the world, but it's your story and they don't know it like you do, right? So they might give you 10 pieces of feedback and 9 of them are useless and 1 of them is helpful. So whenever I say something like that, just keep in mind, like, to anyone, not just for you, but just in general, that, like, I know that what I'm saying might be completely wrong, but I would rather say it and you ignore it than not say it and you not get the, like, the feedback I was thinking of. Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah. All right. Part 2 of 6. One second, guys. All right. Sorry, guys. Now, and honestly, sometimes when I'm reading stuff out loud, it can be hard for me to focus as hard as I would if I were reading it, like, quietly to myself. So again, it's like, if I said something like that, keep in mind that, like, I could be completely faded. But no, I'm freaking loving this. This is, like, much better. Again, just like that other story, I'm noticing a trend with, like, maybe it's because, like, the people who are coming into a stream focused on reading and writing are more invested in reading and writing than most people. But I'm noticing that, like, you guys that are, like, sharing your writing in here is, like, much better writing and much stronger writing than I typically read on Reddit. So you guys are really impressing me. Like, I think you guys are stronger writers than me, which a lot of times I read stuff on Reddit and I'm like, oh yeah, I could do better than this. But you guys are freaking awesome. Like, this is good writing and I really, really love it. Okay. Please, Rain said, voice breaking before he reached the word doors. Vincent, please. Haverson didn't waste time with reassurances. He took one look at the child's skin, gray beneath the fever flesh, veins dark and swollen like bruises under the surface, and felt his stomach drop. Marin, he said sharply, isolation bed, now. Ricky stirred as they laid him down, fingers curling weakly into his father's sleeve. Dad, he whispered. I'm here, Ryan said immediately, pressing his forehead to Ricky's. Sorry, guy. I paused because the author of the story said, hold up. No, no, no. What's going on? What's going on? No, no worries. No worries at all. Yeah, Jake. I'm feeling the same way. I'm gonna give let me open up the schedule really quick while we figure out what's going on. So we're gonna finish Project Nightcrawler Part 2 by Sylv. And keep in mind that if you go to Reddit user Sylv_x_x on Reddit, you can find the full complete novel, which is 6 parts, which I think is definitely worth reading based on what we've read so far. After that, we're going to be reading The Halfway Man, The Oak Ridge Inheritance, and The Hounds of Stalingrad. And these are 3 stories that I'm super excited about. So I'm excited to get to those in just a minute. You know what? Let's go ahead. While I wait for Sylv to tell me what's going on, and like see what's happening, because I think something might be wrong with the second story, maybe. I'm going to go ahead and read Jake's story because it looks like it's that's part 2. Okay, cool. Okay. Okay. So I'm thinking that it sounds like you accidentally linked part 2 to the wrong post, right? Okay. So we're gonna do this one, and after we finish this story, we're gonna jump into Jake's story, and we're gonna keep it pushing. No worries. I've done the same thing on longer posts in the past. It can be confusing with all those different posts and stuff. All right. Yes, precision. His father's voice hardened, feverish. Canines that have an olfactory sense thousands of times sharper than ours, acute hearing, instinctive coordination. Imagine pairing that awareness with a regenerative capability of reptilian DNA. Okay, this makes a lot more sense based on where we ended the first part. It's the next stop of human adaptability. Ooh, 1 second, guys. I'm on the wrong... Hold up. I had the wrong little thing go in here. Okay. Yeah, this one makes a lot more sense based on where the first one ended. All right. It's the next stop of human adaptability. The next step of human adaptability. Elliot's breath caught in his throat. He didn't understand, but the words reptile and canine stuck in his head. It was strange. His father continued, his voice fervent. The adhesive proteins in reptilian dermis, if we can replicate the secretion, we can enhance surface traction, vertical mobility, even wall crawling stability. Combine that with heightened senses and regenerating cells. So we're talking about making like a human that is reptile and canine, and basically taking all the best parts of all of these creatures. That's very interesting and very scary. It's giving like dinosaur territory, right? In a weird way. Marin cut in softly. You'd be creating something that isn't human. There was a long silence. Then his father smiled faintly. Humanity is the limitation, Marin. Elliot pressed his hand against the floor, staring at his reflection in a glass shard nearby. His eyes looked different in the light, pale, almost luminous. The thought filled him with both fear and something else. Curiosity. He wanted to be strong, to be seen, and his father was creating the path. Marin hesitated. And the subject? His father's eyes flicked towards the observation window, the small room Elliot knew too well. We'll start with a willing one this time, he said. The child is adaptive, resilient. And this one, he has motivation. Loss breeds potential. Oh my god, they're talking about Elliot. The father's pen scrawled the name, Project Nightcrawler, across the top of the document. He simply smiled. Now, let's get to work. The laboratory was colder than the rest of the house. Sterile lights casting harsh shadows on the walls, glass vials rattled faintly on the shelves as Elliot sat restrained on the narrow table. His small frame was tense, fists gripping with edges. His father hovered above, syringes filled with viscous liquid glinting in the light. Oh my god, poor Elliot. Tonight we begin, he said softly, almost clinically. Step 1, reptilian tissue regeneration. Step 2, canine sensory augmentation. Elliot didn't speak. He only stared at the table, jaw tight. Inside, he was full of rage and calculated determination. He would endure this. He would become what they wanted, so he could control what came next. The first needle pierced his arm, a sharp burn, then a creeping warmth spreading through his veins. The father's hands were steady and precise, documenting every injection in a leather-bound log. DNA strain R17A administered 3.2 milliliters, initial response normal. Slight cellular activity visible under a microscope. Vital signs are stable. The second injection followed. A thick, almost oily liquid derived from canine neural and sensory genes. Elliot felt his ears prickle as if the room suddenly contained 1,000 tiny buzzing fragments. The faint hum of the lights, the faint thump of his own pulse, even the shuffling of the nurse's shoes seemed amplified. DNA strain C22S, administered 4.8 milliliters, auditory threshold increased, olfactory neurons responding, subject alert, aware, no signs of panic. Elliot's small body twitched involuntarily. He flexed his fingers, noticing a subtle sharpening in the muscles of his hands. He could sense the textures of the table beneath his palms, feeling the vibrations of the floorboards through the metal table. His father noted every reaction meticulously. Day 15, slight hyper-awareness of surroundings, subject tracking auditory and visual stimuli more efficiently, motor reflexes increased by 14%, no aggression has risen. Hours passed on a rhythm of injection, observation, and note-taking. The room smelled faintly of ozone, mixed with the strange coppery scent of past strains. Elliot's body felt strange, muscles coiled differently, joints bending with an unnatural fluidity. He tested some small movements, a flex of his legs. His fingernails grew more into a pointed edge, barely scraping the metal. Day 20. Regenerative cells visible under dermal layers, slight keratin growth observed on phalanges. The subject remains cooperative. The boy's ears twitched. He could hear the faintest vibrations in the lab, the buzzing of a light, the father scribbling notes, even the minuscule drip of liquid from a distant pipe. Day 27. Subject demonstrates early proprioceptive enhancements, sensory integration with vestibular and auditory systems progressing beyond expected parameters. Elliot realized something. He was becoming stronger, faster, and sharper. Every injection, every note, every observation in the log was proof the experiment worked. By the time the injection ceased, his father and nurse stepped back. Elliot's small chest rose and fell rapidly. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, ears twitching toward every sound. The first stirrings of his tail twitched beneath the folds of his body. He flexed his fingers experimentally, feeling the keratin starting to form along his nails. Elliot stopped, recognizing himself in pieces. At first it was small things, easy to deny. His reflection lingered a half-second too long in the glass. His joints bent a little farther than they should have. Sounds carried too clearly now. Footsteps 3 halls away, breathing behind walls, the slow drip of water like a metronome inside his skull. He told himself he was still the same. but the restraint said otherwise. Strapped to the table, he watched the ceiling lights blur as the injections burned their way through his veins. He bit down until his jaw ached, refusing to scream. His father stood over him, scribbling notes, never meeting his eyes. Fascinating, his father murmured once, as his spine arched on its own. Your pain tolerance is improving. Pain tolerance, as if pain were something you trained for. Elliot felt his body change before he could see it. Muscles tightened where they shouldn't, bones shifting with a quiet, wet pressure that made him nauseous. His skin itched constantly now, too tight in some places, too loose in others, like it was deciding whether to stay human. Sometimes, afterward, they let him sit alone in the recovery room. That was when he touched his face. Still his nose, still his mouth, still his eyes, but dark, too large when he was tired. He pressed his fingers against his chest and felt his heartbeat. I'm still here, he whispered. The words sounded strange coming from him. Too low, too rough. When they walked past him through the halls now, the patients reacted differently. Some shrank back, others reached for him through the bars, fingers trembling, eyes wide with recognition or fear. Elliot didn't know which hurt more. At night, when the vents hummed and the lights dimmed, memories crept in. His mother's voice, the weight of the blanket on his shoulders, the way she used to stroke his hair when he couldn't sleep. Those memories were soft and were guarded fiercely, because every day something new took its place in his body. Something sharper, stronger, less forgiving. His hunger came differently now, not just for food, but for space. Yet, even as his hands grew unfamiliar and his shadow stretched wrung against the wall, Elliot held on to one truth like a lifeline. Project Nightcrawler is progressing ahead of schedule, his father noted, oblivious to the spark of awareness and cunning already blazing behind those glowing eyes. The leather-bound book sat on the lab table, thick with months of meticulous notes, each entry full of chronicled injections, measurements, observations, and the subtle changes that no one else had noticed. Month 1. DNA strain R17A/C22S, administered daily. The subject remains cooperative. Mild increase in muscular flexibility observed. Minor keratin growth on phalanges. Auditory threshold increased by 12%. Subject alert, aware, no aggression. Emotional response. Grief persists. Focus heightened. Month 2. Reinforced injections of R17A. Adhesive dermal secretion introduced in trace amounts. The subject demonstrates the early ability to adhere to smooth surfaces. Tail formation observed under the dermal layer. Non-functional. Olfactory neurons responding at 18% increase. The subject shows signs of deliberate experimentation with movement. Month 3. Keratin growth progressing along digits. Tail now flexible, 2 centimeters in length. Rudimentary musculature forming. Subject begins testing auditory and olfactory limits independently. Aggression remains controlled. Emotional manipulation suggested the potential to exploit grief and resentment as conditioning. Ah, man. I'm really loving that. And it's hard to not jump into part 3 right now based off all the changes that are happening to him. I feel like it's really like building to a boiling point, and we're about to be at part 3, which is the halfway point. And so I'm expecting that Elliot's going to start fighting back soon. He's playing along to get all of his like superpowers almost. And then he's going to fight back. And I really love that. Yeah. No, I feel like this is going to get really exciting as we move on to part 3. Very well written. I'm not very science-y, but I feel like in terms of believability, in the sense of, changing a human in this way, it's as believable as you can make a science fiction world in a way like this. It's working very well. It seems like you did some research to make this effective in that way. And I think this is really exciting. There's a lot to play with here. The grief his mom, the way he's feeling towards his dad and Nurse Marin, and then the fact that he's becoming stronger, and they know that he's becoming stronger, and he's playing along, biding his time. Something's gonna happen. This anger he feels is gonna come to fruition soon. And I'm excited to see that happen. Again, guys, check out Sylv_X_X on Reddit and read the rest of this if you're interested. I definitely will be off stream reading the rest. Yeah, Sylv. But as far as like actually making it happen in a fictional world, I feel like you're doing a super strong job making this very believable. The emotions are real. I believe the characters, which is the hardest part of writing something like this. Like, we can suspend our disbelief on the sciencey things, but we need to believe that this father's an asshole and that this character exists. We need to believe Nurse Marin. And it makes sense. We understand why the father's driven the way he is. We understand why Nurse Marin is doing what she is. And we understand why Elliot's doing what he's doing, because he wants revenge and he wants to fight back, right? We understand all the characters and their actions make sense, which is why this is effective and why we want to keep reading. So good job with this. The descriptions, especially in part 1, were beautiful. Part 2, we just didn't need as many descriptions, right? But the descriptions you did have were effective, and I'm excited to read the rest later on. I hope everyone else will too. I definitely will be. So I'm going to get ready for the next story, The Halfway Man. Yeah, it's gonna get super, super interesting, bros. A real brain twister. I'm excited to read the rest later. I have so many things I need to read. I need to read Augustus's book, and then I need to read the rest of your Reddit novel, and then I have some other books I'm finishing, and I'm really excited to read The Halfway Man, The Oak Ridge Inheritance, and The Hounds of Stalingrad. Ooh, you had an actual dream of him. That's gonna be real interesting. Let's get to it. The Halfway Man. I met a man with only half a face, and ever since, he's been stalking me. I know he's going to kill me, eventually. But don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and let it happen. Even though I've sealed myself into a fate I cannot escape, I'm going to continue to struggle for my own survival until the end. I figured I should share my story here before the inevitable happens, so that none of you make the same mistakes I did when I first encountered the Halfway Man. It was a windy night, the first time I encountered the thing that still haunts my every waking moment. A light drizzle came and went in waves, signaling the approaching storm. I was asleep in the single bedroom of my ground floor apartment I shared with my cat Hank. My gray friend was curled up on the pillow next to me as I drifted off to dreamland. Whoever was driving me there decided to take a sharp turn, taking me from a peaceful slumber straight into a nightmare that I can never recover from. In the dream, I stood alone on a dark suburban street, lined with rows of lightless houses. Every street lamp was dead, except for one, faintly flickering a few dozen yards away. Beneath it stood a figure, motionless. I felt myself drawn towards his presence, not by curiosity, but by a force beyond my will. As I crept closer, I saw him more clearly. Black hoodie, gray pants, no shoes. I didn't want to get any closer, but I couldn't stop myself. I was dragged towards him, watching helplessly, until we were face to face. I stared into a single bloodshot eye and felt a scream building within my chest that just couldn't escape. The other half of his head was just gone, split down the middle in a jagged line. No gore, no mess. Just a hollow void where the rest of his face should have been. Strands of dark hair spilled in front of the single eye as the lone nostril pulsated above unmoving lips. It wasn't objectively terrifying, in a dream at least, to see a man with half of his face missing. There was no blood, no violent scars, but staring at him, in his uncaring and unwavering gaze, the utter vacancy in his stare, I was filled with such an overwhelming sense of dread, so suffocating that I bolted upright, dripping with sweat. I sat there panting for a few minutes, trying to get my rapidly beating heart under control. I'm prone to bouts of heightened anxiety. I refuse to call them panic attacks. I ran my fingers across the fur of my unbothered friend. Hank was always a comfort whenever my heart started to kick into overdrive. I stayed there, motionless, for a while, before finally standing up to use the restroom. As I washed my hands, I looked up towards the dimly lit mirror and nearly jumped out of my skin. There, standing at the bathroom door, was a hooded figure hunched over behind me. I spun around, heart hammering, only to see my towel hanging from its rack. I exhaled. Oh. Sorry, guys. Yeah, you know what? Let me go ahead and change that on the stream really quick. I'm really loving this story so far. The Halfway Man. What like a simple thing to title a man who's literally halfway. And I think like using a simple title like that is I think it can really bring people into the story more, and it does kind of characterize the main character, because he doesn't have the time to like sit there and think of something creative to call this guy. He's literally just a halfway man, right? As I washed my hands, I looked up towards a dimly lit mirror and nearly jumped out of my skin. There, standing at the bathroom door, was a hooded figure hunched over behind me. I spun around, heart hammering, only to see my towel hanging from its rack. I exhaled, relief that it was my overactive imagination that had placed the image of my nightmare into the cloth hanging on the door. I retreated back to the safety of my covers, convinced everything was all right. Sleep came easy, and I had a restful night. In the morning, I got a call from my younger brother, David. We don't speak much. Neither of us that great at keeping in contact with each other, so I knew it must be important if he was calling this early in the morning. Mom was dead. They found her lying in her bed, heart attack. I would have thought her lungs or liver would have gone out first. She was far from the perfect mother, always carrying around a bottle and cigarette whenever she stumbled around the house. She was never the same after Dad died, and seemed to be drowning her memories in drugs and alcohol until they were gone forever. It was when she started taking meth that the childcare services finally came to our rescue. I love how simple the writing is right here. It's not trying to do too much because the weight of what's happening is enough. There's no build up. It's Mom was dead. She started doing meth. Right? It's just bam, bam. That's good. I like that. We went to live with our grandmother, who took care of us for the rest of our childhoods. Still, we lived with our mother alone for a few years, and it was enough for me to sever ties with her. Still, she was family, and the least I could do was join my brother in the funeral arrangements. Even though I was the oldest, Mom had made my brother the successor of the will, probably because he didn't hate her as much. Since he was too young to really remember the pain she brought us. That's very, very real. The funeral was short and quiet, my brother's family making up half the attendees. We both stood there together afterwards, staring at her simple headstone. She would always ask me about you, you know, he said to me without turning. I stayed silent. She still cared about you. Us. I looked at him. If she cared about us, then what about these burns? I rolled back my right sleeve to reveal the series of cigarette burns still ingrained in my skin. I'm not saying she didn't have her issues, David replied, averting his eyes from my glare. But she was able to change. She would have been sober 6 months tomorrow. So what? I shot back. It doesn't change the past. We both stood there in silence for a moment more. As I turned to return to my car, my brother asked me something that stopped me dead in my tracks. Do you remember the Halfway Man? A shiver ran through my spine. No, I began, unable to remember who he was talking about, but still feeling like I knew the name from somewhere. It was that story Mom used to tell us at bedtime. That if we weren't good boys, the halfway man would get us. I shook my head. I try not to remember too much about living with her. Why do you ask? He cast his eyes downward before responding. Just something the nurse said she was muttering for a few days before she passed. She kept saying the halfway man was coming for her. Wow, I love that after we get the initial glimpse of him. And I was wondering how you were going to bring her back into the story, Jake. Because I was really thinking, like, how is the halfway man relevant to this conversation? But you just brought it back in a way that worked really well. So that was good. He looked up at me again, seeing the blank expression on my face. You really don't remember him? He was just like the boogeyman, but with only half a face. I was a little disturbed on my ride back to my apartment. I didn't say anything to David about my nightmare. I figured it was a coincidence. My subconscious pulling out the thoughts of a scary story from my childhood just happened to coincide with my mother's passing. Heck, it might have been her last jab at tormenting me before passing over to the other side. Still didn't stop my mind from racing as I tried to bring up bad memories of the past. I could kind of remember our mother sitting us down at night and spouting something about a man who will come to drag us away if we were acting bad. But that's where my recollection ends. That's when I saw him again. In the side mirror of my car, I saw the image of a man in a hoodie for the split second I checked it. The same figure that appeared in my dream. I lost control momentarily as the beating of my heart reached a fever pitch. I swerved left and right before regaining control of the car. I pulled over to the side to try to get my breathing back under control. The car behind me passed by with a honk and a middle finger. After a few minutes, I was able to get back to normal. I checked the mirror once more, just to see the steady stream of passing cars. No strange figures in sight. I don't know why I was getting so spooked by the halfway man bullshit, but I needed to find out more. I decided to poke around on the internet for a bit once I got home. I booted up my PC and closed some work browsers before typing in halfway man into the search bar. Hank jumped up onto the desk and started purring, begging for attention. I obliged, idly scratching his back while I peeked around his furry form at the results. I could find from a normal search was a book by the same title, but it had nothing to do with what I was looking for. I figured it was probably some story she had conjured up just to torment us with, but I decided to try some online forums and see what other people had to say. Nobody on the message boards had useful information. Several users were skeptical, thought I was just trying to drum up my own internet mystery. Someone even so far as to push me to take my post down. It was a couple of days before I got a proper lead. The weather had gone from bad to worse, the rain pouring hard against the side of my apartment. So far, I hadn't seen the man with half a face since the drive home from the funeral, so I decided to just put it out of my mind. Then I got a random DM with a number that simply said, "Call me." I would have ignored it, but I recognized the username. It was the same user who was on every single one of my posts telling me to take it down. I decided to call. I was ready for a yelling match since he was usually pretty aggressive in his comments online, but after one ring, a man's panicked voice came from the other side of the phone. "Are you alone? What do you want to know? Make sure you're alone, and go somewhere with no reflections. Do you have wireless headphones? Put those in. Leave your phone behind and close your eyes." He sounded cagey and unwell. My hope in getting something useful out of this phone call waning. I waited a few minutes, rustled around a bit, then replied, "Okay, I'm ready." He stayed silent. I wondered if he was hesitant to answer or if he knew I had just pretended to follow his instructions. Then he spoke. "The halfway man is real, man. But he only exists when you know he's real. Just take your stupid post down. Forget about him and you'll be fine." Okay, I think I see where this is going. I think this is turning into one of those stories where, like one of those chainmails where it's like, now we know about him, and so now he's going to come for us. So at the end of the story, it's going to end with something along the lines of, like, "Now you all know about the halfway man," or something like that. And I'm digging that. I'm not saying that like in a bad way. I'm digging that because I love those posts. And I could also just be completely wrong about where this is going. But if it is going in that direction, I think that's great. And I love it. I think we don't get enough of those types of stories. I think the only like real comment I have is I would have liked to build a little more tension around this guy who keeps telling him to put his post down. The only hint we got about him was some people even told me to take my post down. And we didn't see that someone had been commenting on all of his posts until the last, like, couple paragraphs. It would have been interesting if we got that hint. Someone, like this guy, like user X72, kept telling me to take my post down. And then we as readers were wondering, why is he saying that? But that's okay. We still got here. And that's like the smallest note ever. That wasn't enough to satisfy me. Please tell me more. I need to understand this before I can just forget it all. He paused again before continuing. All right, listen, because I am not repeating this. He comes into our world when you think of him, but he can only exist in one place at a time. Then he crosses over fully once you believe he's real. Before then, you could only see him in reflections. What about dreams? I asked. A reflection of our mind. Have you seen him? I explained my dream, the last words of my mother, and how she died. I also told him she used to tell my brother and I the story of the halfway man, even though I had forgotten. The man stayed silent throughout my explanation. When I finished, I asked, what does he do when he comes over? He drags you back to where he's from, then waits until he can cross over again. The hairs on the back of my neck stood tall when he said that. I shifted nervously in my chair, my heart beginning to beat faster. So how does he choose where he come? My question was cut short by Hank suddenly hissing at the window behind my desk and darting away, knocking one of my monitors down. What was that? The man on the phone asked in a panicked voice. Shit, my cat just knocked my monitor over, I unfortunately replied, forgetting I was supposed to be following his instructions from earlier. Fuck, I knew I shouldn't have tried to help. Fuck you, man. Fuck you. You're on your own. With that, the call ended. I was alone in my apartment. Well, not quite alone as I had hoped. When I turned to look at what my cat had hissed at, I saw him. The halfway man, that unwelcome figure in a dark hoodie, was standing on the other side of the window. I quickly turned away and closed my eyes before I could see what I knew would only be half of a face. Even though I couldn't see him, I could feel his hateful glare piercing the back of my neck. My breaths became short and quick. I needed to sit down, but I was too frightened to open my eyes. I kept repeating myself, it's not real, it's not real. After a few minutes, I felt something brush against my leg. It was Hank, and I was never more grateful for my cat than I was in that moment. I tentatively opened my eyes and glanced at the window. Nothing. I breathed a sigh of relief and tried to pretend like everything was okay. I spent the rest of my evening trying to push the thoughts of the halfway man out of my mind. But how could I? At the door, the microwave, the blank monitor screen, even the reflection of the kitchen faucet, I could just barely see him. His still form, the stringy hair, that lone eyeball staring right through me. I grabbed some sleeping pills and headed to bed. If I couldn't put him out of my mind, hopefully these drugs would. I washed them down with a bottle of water and slipped under the covers. Hank curled up next to me, and I let the soft and fuzzy comfort calm my racing heart. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke in the dead of the night. Thunder rumbled outside as a loud banging echoed from my window. I reached out instinctively for Hank, but he was gone. My stomach sank. I got up and slowly peeked through the blinds, bracing myself for the worst. It was just a sunshade. The wind had loosened it during the storm, and it clattered back and forth against the window. I let out a shaky breath and grabbed my jacket. There was no way I could sleep with all that racket. Out in the storm, soaked and miserable, I worked to coil the shade while the wind and rain continued to beat down on me. I almost would have preferred the halfway man. I glanced in through my bedroom window and froze. Inside the window, reflected in the window just inside my closet, was the hooded man I was trying to forget. I tried to shrug it off, tell myself that it was just one of my hoodies hanging inside, but something was off. This time he wasn't just staring. My heart began to beat faster as I realized why his hateful glare was no longer the only thing that frightened me. He was moving. His pale hand gripped the edge of the door as he slowly pulled it shut from the inside, watching me the whole time. He was in my room. He was in my room and trying to hide in my closet. I thought about running right there. If he was in my house right now, he was definitely going to kill me. But I remembered what that psycho on the phone had said. He's only real if you think he's real. If I ran right now, I'd be admitting it. Admitting that the halfway man was really inside my house. That he was real. If I went back inside, calm, normal, and acting like he wasn't real, then maybe he wouldn't be. I had seen him in the window. He could still just be a reflection. I went back inside and started to write. I told you I'm writing to warn you. But really, I'm trying to save myself. You all would have been fine never knowing about the halfway man. But you see, he can't be in more than one place at a time. So every time you think you see someone in the corner of your eye, every shadow that moves wrong, every reflection that makes you take a second look, I need you to believe. Believe in the halfway man. Because if enough of you believe, maybe he'll come for you instead. Maybe that'll pull him away from me long enough to learn how to forget. That's what I'm telling myself right now as I sit here typing. I pretend I can't hear the closet door shift slightly, the quiet footsteps creeping closer. I pretend that I can't feel his breath upon my neck or his lone eye burning into me from just beyond my view. I pretend I can't feel his cold hand tightening around my shoulder. I pretend he's not real. I have to. Wow. Wow. I love this. This is giving like classic creepypasta, classic no sleep story. We need a new creature. I feel like we haven't got a new I feel like we haven't got a new like creature recently, like in the like no sleep creepypasta community. Like we have Slenderman, we have Jeff the Killer, I'm blanking on like other ones, you know, like the Rake and the Running Man, the one that like, and then like the one who walks backwards. And we have all these different characters. This is my like formal request for the Halfway Man to become the next one. I would love to see some art done of the Halfway Man. And I really love that. And this is one of the only stories I've read in a long time because I don't get scared by writing very much. I think it's because of my aphantasia. But this is one of the only ones where I think I'm genuinely going to be like scared after this, which is a very difficult thing to do with a no sleep story, or like something that's written or like a Reddit story, not no sleep. Because it's so real. Everyone has those moments where like they think they see something in a reflection out of the corner of their eye, and then they look and there's nothing there. But like for a second, you could have sworn it was there. So, and I think that's the secret to writing good quality horror, is taking those experiences that we all have and turning them into something extreme. And I think that's what you did here. And you put a name to it, the Halfway Man. So I think for the rest of my life, every time I see a little piece of glass and I see a reflection in it and I think I saw something, my first thought's going to be the Halfway Man. And I hope this can gain some more popularity. I think you said something about like you had originally written it for No Sleep. I think this is a story that could do well on No Sleep, or even like creepypasta.com with the right title. I think you could do really well with this. I really enjoyed that. So thanks for sharing that. I'm going to try to move a little bit fast, guys, because I can go a little bit after 10, but I'm supposed to be done around 10. And we have 2 more stories to get through. So I might not have as much time to talk about these last 2. And I'm going to cut my thoughts on that one. Yeah, that's what I was saying, Jwick. It reminds me of like those chain emails. I mean, I'm a little too young to have gotten those, but I know of them. This reminds me of those, yeah. And it's a very cool spin on it. I have more to say about how much I love it, but I'm going to try to get through these last 2 stories. But yeah, Jake, keep writing, dude. I would love like more stories about the Halfway Man. It would also be cool to have like, if we had like a group of writers all write their own stories about the Halfway Man and then post them like together, like one of us each day or something. Not specifically the Halfway Man. I just think like that Halfway Man is like a good like one to do that with. I miss when people did stuff like that. But no, that's your creation, and you did your thing, man. That was good. All right. Yeah, he's a good one. Halfway Man's a good one. You did well with that. So we're gonna hop into the Oak Ridge Inheritance from Broads_lit. I'll say this, if you do !schedule in the chat, Sylv, because his name is like, yeah, it's suspicious fact. I didn't remember the numbers, but if you do !schedule, it'll have a link to the story, and you can access it pretty quickly from there. But the Oak Ridge Inheritance by Broads_lit, I really enjoyed his story from last stream, the third thing. So I'm curious to see what he does with this. Looks like it's psychological horror. And if you enjoy his work, I'd check out his Substack, where I believe he's going to be publishing an anthology soon. If he's in the chat, he can tell more about it. But yeah, follow him on Reddit and his Substack. He's a great writer. I'm excited to read this. Oh, thank you, Nat. Can I type? Cool. Yeah, so follow Broads on Substack, Reddit, if you enjoy this, and it sounds like he'll have more stuff coming out soon. All right. On April 2nd, 1989, my mama died in her sleep. She was 82 years old. My brother Benji found her lying on her back with her eyes closed. I found Benji screaming, hunched over her cold body and slapping her corpse, big fat tears running out his wide eyes as he pleaded with her to wake up. I calmed him down, told him I'd call the doc, and sent him to wait in his garden. The barn needed cleaning, so after the call, I worked while I waited. It rained the day we buried her, like something out of a movie. A dull gray rain that lingered and made you feel wet even beneath your umbrella. Benji's tears were all spent by then, though. He done his crying before the rains, where everyone could see it. He didn't talk for 12 straight days after that, like back when he was little. On the evening of the 12th day, he up and told me he was going to clean the barn tomorrow. When I got up the next day, I found him swinging from the rafters. I'd stepped outside for my morning coffee and a cigarette and saw that the barn doors were still open. I crossed the small yard that lay between the farmhouse and barn, passing Benji's garden along the way. He just planted a few days before Mama passed, and already growth was overtaking the small plot. For all his faults, at least he'd had a green thumb. The barn smelled of hay and dried dung and old timber. The wood came from the forest that once grew around the property. Our family had long since cut and sold all the timber, starting all the way back when Grandpa acquired the land. We were some of the first to settle in these parts, and the barn was likely one of the oldest ones in the state. The wood from the forest was good and stiff, as sturdy as a man could ask for. Benji's body was stiff as a board when I cut him down. He landed in the hay. It sounded like a bag of flour, a low, dull thud. He kicked up dust when he landed. Dust that caught the morning light passing through the open barn doors. I sneezed as I climbed down the ladder and inhaled the dust. It got in my eyes and made them water. The dust made me cry. I poured whiskey in my coffee as I waited for the ambulance to arrive. I waited for a good long while. Our property was way out in the boonies. Technically, it all passed to Benji when Mama died. It's just mine now. Lily pawed at my knee as I sat waiting on the porch. She whimpered and stretched her jaw into a wide yawn. Her canines were sharp and yellow. Benji's teeth never did come in right. The ambulance pulled up the dirt road and passed the Welcome to Oak Ridge Farm sign Benji and I had planted when we were children. I kept my hands in my jacket as the man approached. The responder wore his navy blues, and he had a lip swollen full with tobacco. His partner looked nervous. We spoke for a moment. Then I let him into the barn. "Why'd you cut him down?" the lead asked. His name was Rick, and I took him for the lead because there was no way in hell the other guy was in charge. "Couldn't stand to leave him up there any longer," I said. You really shouldn't have moved him. The police will say it looks fishy. I shrugged my shoulders at that. It was far too late to worry about how it all looked. I stepped back outside for some more air while the boys called for the ME. About 2 hours later, I said goodbye to the ME as he drove off with my brother's body. The police had their questions, sure, but I'd been drinking buddies with the chief for years. He knew me. He knew Mama. But most importantly, he knew Benji. Damn shame, he'd said shortly after entering the barn. My mind was on the cattle out in the pasture and the wheat growing in the fields. It was almost time for harvest. I had to get things done. He show any signs? Ever tell you what was on his mind? I shook my head no. All he said that he was gonna go clean the barn in the morning. It was the first and last thing he'd said since Mama died. The chief sighed and shook his head. Damn shame. I walked the chief out to his car. He rolled his window down before driving off. I know you're going through a lot right now. Just take some time, swing by in a few days, and we'll get the paperwork squared away. I'll go ahead and let the county clerk know you'll be by soon for the property transfer and the dissolution of that, or what was it called again? Conservatorship, I said quietly. I'll be up later. Get it taken care of. Right. You take care now. I watched the chief pull away, his truck kicking up a trailing ribbon of dirt that spiraled into thin clouds before settling in the grass on the other side of the road. He'd had a look in his eye, hadn't he? A queer one. The kind of look you give a thug or an out-of-towner. Not a man who's driven you home countless times after one too many. No. I must have imagined it. I stayed outside a moment, pacing the gravel, hands laced behind my head, thinking, ignoring the sting of sweat on my rope-burned palms. The paperwork all went through, and I buried Benji beneath his garden. There was some debate with distant relatives who thought he should be next to Mama. I didn't want to do that to her, despite it all. I made sure to keep the garden intact. It was a beautiful garden. That year was the biggest harvest Oak Ridge Farms had ever seen. Stalks of wheat taller than a man, with full heads of grain. I managed to pay off all the funeral expenses that year, with plenty left afterwards. I met a nice girl from the town over that year as well. Her name was Patty. Patty baked and sold her goods down to the local farmer's market. She used Oak Ridge's wheat for her bread and sold out every time. People couldn't get enough of it. But whenever I ate it, all I tasted was ash. The herd was hit with a case of spring fever that year as well. The vet couldn't believe it. Neither could I. Every cow that year gave birth to twins. Some even had triplets, all of them healthy and strong. The vet said he'd never seen or even heard of such a thing. The herd grew and grew, all of them fat and robust. Patty started selling their meat at the market as well. We could charge whoever we wanted, and people would pay it. That's how good everyone said the cattle at Oak Ridge Farms were. But whenever I ate it, no matter how long I made Patty grill it, all I could taste was raw flesh and blood. I could handle the wheat. I could handle the cattle. But what I couldn't handle, what no one could handle, was the garden. It seemed to grow with a mind of its own, spreading every year, no matter how often I fixed the fence or trimmed the plants. Patty didn't think much of it. In fact, she enjoyed the garden and its bounty. Looks like Benji's still helping out from beyond the grave. Huh, hun, she'd say with a smile. I sure do wish I could have met him. He sounds like such a kind soul. I'd nod my head, but inside I knew something was wrong. The tomatoes burst in my mouth like pimples. The cucumbers cracked like bone. I couldn't eat any of it. I couldn't eat. Patty prided herself on preparing for each meal only what the Lord had blessed our farm with. She scolded me when she found grease stains on my shirts, or empty bags and cups in my work truck. The fast stuff was all I could eat, all I could keep down. The worst came a year after Benji's death, on his anniversary. I stepped outside to reject the meal Patty had made. I had to, otherwise it would curdle in my stomach. She didn't know any of this. God, she didn't deserve any of this. I barely made it out the door and leaned over the porch railing. I vomited right on top of Benji's grave. It was then I noticed the roses. They were magnificent. Large flowers of deep lavender grew all across the garden. They grew as I watched, their petals blossoming, their thorns stretching longer and longer. I threw up again and again. Their smell, their stench was overwhelming, like a field hit with blight, like a dead cow left to rot beneath the sun. Like Benji's room when he'd have an accident, Mama would ask me to help her clean it up. In that moment, I waited for Benji. I knew he was coming. I knew I was about to pay for what I'd done. But damn it all. It was my farm. It was always supposed to be my farm. Why hadn't she trusted me? Of course I was going to take care of him, as if I'd abandoned my only brother. To do that to me. Just strip away all I had worked for and give it to an imbecile. What was she thinking? What choice did she leave me? My tears mixed with the bile staining Benji's headstone as I waited for the roses to take me. I felt their petals lick my skin like the barbed tongue of the devil himself. Those thorns inched near the crown of my head, and I prepare myself to die a wicked man damned by my wronged brother beneath the eyes of a just God. Only death never came. He whispered from the bushes. His voice laughed in the wind, but it never showed his face. The roses retreated, the thorns scratching my skin as they went, but leaving me otherwise unharmed. Patty found me there in the morning. My clothes were soaked with sweat, and she said I was shivering like I'd been out in a winter storm. I don't remember any of it. I still can't eat the food. I take no joy in the fruit of my labor, but I no longer care. Because there was another voice that night apart from death's, and it said, I love you, Bubba. Man, that was really, really good. It was very strong writing and very, it doesn't surprise me that at the end here, he says it was in a Substack lit mag, because this is something that's more about, I would say, it's something that I feel like was more about the emotion than necessarily about the horror, which is not a bad thing. It's actually a very good thing that the emotion was even stronger than the horror. And it made me care about the characters. And it made me feel like there was a lot going on in this world. And it was very deep and very sad. And I could definitely see this working on a more professional scale than Reddit. The writing is strong. Everything is very succinct. It has a practice quality to it that's, you knew when to use very simple sentences and where to dive into the more complex ones. Like I love like what I have highlighted right here. The cucumbers cracked like bone. I couldn't eat any of it. I couldn't eat. The 3 simple sentences in a row, and then immediately, followed by some longer sentences, complex sentence, compound sentence. Just like on the very like technical level, the writing was very good, while also not taking away from the story and trying to do too much. It's a very, very enjoyable, very strong writing. I really like that one. And it was a nice kind of change of pace from the other stories that we read, where I think the other ones were, for the most part, at least the Halfway Man was very like focused on scaring us. This one was focused on making us sad and keeping us engaged with the world more so than just the story. So I really like that. Good job, dude. That was really strong. Yeah, I'm thinking about, it's on a link for you? Is the schedule link not working for you guys? It should be. But, regardless, got the schedule pulled up right here. We're about to start the last story of the day, which is The Hounds of Stalingrad by Hypnocast, which I'm excited to read. But I do want to say thanks for sharing that story, Broads. Yeah, it was depressing, but you have stronger like writing technical skill than most stuff that I've read. Than most stuff I've read on Reddit. So very like practice quality, which I enjoyed. Cool. No, I haven't read this. I wanted to because it looks super interesting, but I tried to hold off till today so that I could read it for the first time live on stream. As far as like getting stuff on Spotify and YouTube, I'll talk about that probably later on when I have a little bit more planned out. But my thought is that I pretty much would just rip the stream and post it on YouTube, post it on Spotify. And I know like it won't be like super professional since there's going to be a lot of me talking to the chat and things like that. But as far, you know, I don't expect to get a lot of views on YouTube or Spotify. Just anyone who's interested in listening and wasn't able to catch the stream, just to be able to listen to it later on, right? So I figure I'll probably do that in the next couple of weeks, is rip all the streams, upload just the MP4 onto YouTube, and then just take the MP3 and put that on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And then I'm going to be on YouTube and TikTok making TikToks and YouTube shorts. And just whenever I have something that's like relatively exciting, just clipping the stream, putting it on there, just to, you know, see if I can get some traction going on those platforms. I'm trying to keep everything. I'm trying to do a lot, but I'm trying to stay away from doing too much work because, you know, obviously I'm a full-time student and then I work on top of that. And then writing is my priority over streaming. So writing is always going to come first. Like if I only have time to either write or stream, I'm always going to write first. And so that goes along with anything when it comes to making content. So I'm trying to keep the workload super, super small. So that way I can put more time into the other things. But again, Broads, like that story, I feel like I haven't said enough about how much I enjoyed it. It's almost hard to talk about because it was such like a depressing, like just clean story. And I just know that the writing was really good and I enjoyed it. All right. Hounds of Stalingrad by Hypnocast. The formatting is catching my attention right away. I have a lot of italicization. So I want to see what's going on here. The Hounds of Stalingrad. The following document has been translated from Russian into English. It was recovered during post-engagement sanitation and cleanup operations conducted after the Battle of Stalingrad. The original manuscript has been secured. Distribution of this translation is strictly limited. Document classification: top secret. Clearance level: Alpha 1. Access restricted to authorized personnel only. Unauthorized review. Duplication or dissemination of this material constitutes a violation of wartime security statutes. Authorization granted. 29 January 1943. Stalingrad is a grave. Smoke chokes my lungs, and the ruins of the place I once called home groans under the weight of countless men and boys. Each day I see men stripped of their humanity, by fear, by loneliness, haunted by the sight of the things they have done, and terrified of the things they have yet to do. And yet, somehow, they endure. Despite all that they suffer, there remains a spirit among them, a light that diminishes day by day, yet still fights to remain, however fruitless that may be. I write this in the hope that someone, someday, will know the truth of the horrors that have occurred here. I've seen the depths of depravity my comrades have sunk to, desperate for even a fleeting taste of victory over the accursed fascists. Whether that victory will come, or if we will survive to see it, remains uncertain. If these are to be my final words, let them be this. Long march toward annihilation has doomed us all. The only thing left is to pray to whatever God you might believe in, that it shows you some measure of the mercy we have withheld from one another. From here on, I will relay the story of the Hounds in as much detail as I can, in the hope that it may serve as a warning to whoever finds this. I was tasked with tending to the bodies of my fallen brethren. We couldn't bury them. There was no earth left to dig, no time to waste. The dead were loaded onto carts where they fell, half buried in snow, frozen into the rubble as if the city itself refused to release them. Really loving the somber tone of the there's some finality in the writing itself, which I really like. And yeah, I keep forgetting to change the stupid on-screen title, so let me change that really quick. But I'm pretty hooked on this already. I'll go ahead and just start right here. From here on, I will relay the story of the Hounds in as much detail as I can, in the hope that it may serve as a warning to whoever finds this. I was tasked with tending to the bodies of my fallen brethren. We couldn't bury them. There was no earth left to dig, no time to waste. The dead were loaded onto carts where they fell, half buried in snow, frozen into the rubble as if the city itself refused to release them. It was during this work that I first heard the gruesome rumors from among my fellow gravetenders, whispers of things moving in the shadows, of missing corpses. I ignored the mutterings, as anyone would, and continued working late into the frigid day. Soon, there was only Petrov and myself, stacking the endless supply of bodies onto carts. Petrov invited me back to his quarters. He had just gotten his hands on a smuggled bottle of vodka and wanted to lighten the mood with me and, hopefully, a couple of girls. I told him I would join him, but that I would haul the rest of the bodies to the burn pit. That was my first mistake. I should have died with him then. I would have rather met the same gruesome fate he did than live even one more day with the curse that has been bestowed upon me. The snow was hard and brittle beneath my boots. I pushed the cart toward the western ruins, where the burn pile had been dug. The ice underfoot shifted and threatened to throw both me and the cart to the ground, and I nearly allowed it. I found myself wishing, not for the first time, that I might strike my head hard enough to slip into oblivion and be spared the effort of facing another day. The bodies were the same as they always were, fixed in interrupted moments. Some were twisted as if they had tried to stand or crawl away, arms bent at wrong angles, fingers locked into hooks that grasped at nothing. Others looked almost deliberate in their stillness, legs straightened, hands folded, as though the cold had mistaken them for people at rest. Mouths were frozen, open mid-breath or mid-cry, caught in a final shape of disbelief, not just at death itself, but at the fact that the Nazis had chosen them for it. Faces held expressions that would never change, fear without release, confusion without answer, defiance sealed behind ice-dulled eyes. I stacked them carefully and without haste, numb even when I recognized someone, to keep myself from unraveling. I counted each body as I placed it onto the pile. The numbers mattered. Losing track, even briefly, was enough to invite something worse. By the time the cart was empty, my hands ached with cold and effort. I turned away from the pile and readied myself for the night ahead, the long hours I was to spend with Petrov. Something continued to trouble me. The bodies were burning, though only just, their fire struggling against the falling snow. Snowflakes hissed as they touched the embers, and beyond it all, the steady thud of shelling pressed on, a sound so constant it had long since lost any meaning. Still, the feeling at the base of my spine would not fade. I scanned the ruins, forcing myself to look closely, certain that if I named the source of the dread, it might loosen its grip. My eyes passed over the broken walls, drifts of ash, and the dull glow of the fire. Then I saw it, and understood what had been calling my attention all along. The snow around the burn pit had been disturbed, quite recently it seemed, by strange-looking footprints, and wide swaths of snow where it seemed something had been dragged. I told myself that it was nothing, that it was just my nerves playing tricks on me. I was tired and needed to sleep, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, a pair of eyes was looking at me. I told myself many things, but the feeling of being watched would not leave me. At one point, I paused to rest, leaning against the cart, and heard a rustle behind me, soft and deliberate, too heavy to be the wind. I whipped around, but there was nothing, just the ruins, just the snow. Still, the hair on my arm stood upright, stood straight, and a cold dread settled in my stomach. By the time I had finished, the sun had fallen, leaving nothing but a gray light to wash over the ruins of the city. My mind was only on the vodka I hoped to wash down, and the woman I hoped would accompany me to bed. Petrov's quarter were quiet when I arrived. The door to the half-shelled building sat askew on its hinges, letting the cold air whistle into the desolate structure. I remember thinking, quite absurdly, that I had misjudged the time. Maybe Petrov had simply yet to start drinking. I called his name as loudly as I dare, then once more a bit louder. No reply came. With great trepidation, I pushed forward into the room. Inside, everything was in disarray, more so than usual. A mess would not have been strange. Petrov was never a tidy man, but this was chaos wholly unmade by human hands. A bottle of vodka lay shattered on the floor, its contents spread wide and filling the cold air with a sharp, stinging smell. A chair had been overturned, a table thrown violently against the wall, splinters across the room. Coats and uniforms lay flung about, ripped and torn, boots sat abandoned, kicked away in haste. There had been laughter here once. Now there was only the howling wind outside. I noticed the smell of blood before I saw it. The familiar bite of gunpowder was absent, replaced by the coppery stench of carnage, layered with something else that was wet, animal, and furred. It reminded me of the time my dog was beaten and thrown into the river by older boys. When I finally saw the blood, I found it smeared across the floor in a single direction, as if something heavy had been dragged through it. Yet, I found no bodies. I stood there for an indeterminate length of time, staring at the empty spaces where Petrov should have been, where the women should have been. I searched the room again and again, as though repetition might summon them back into being. In the corner, near the window, were deep gouges in the wood. They were uneven and far too wide to have been made by a blade or shrapnel. I reached out to touch them, then stopped, suddenly certain I should not. As I stood there, my thoughts spiraling through every explanation I could imagine, a sound reached my ears, barely audible. Beneath the screaming blizzard came a low crunch. It was heavy and deliberate. Something was moving through the snow. The hair on my neck stood on end. I felt like a rabbit caught in a snare, knowing the end was near yet unable to act. My hand drifted toward the knife at my hip, but a stronger instinct overwhelmed it. The urge was to run until my legs gave out. I did not move. I did not flee. I simply listened, my breath shallow, my muscles locked. The sound lingered, then faded, as if whatever made it had decided I was not worth the effort, or that I could wait. I left the quarters quickly, every step back to the barracks tight with dread. I told no one where I had been, I told no one what I had seen. Silence was prudence, and panic spreads like wildfire. I told myself many things, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever stalks these ruins is hungry, and it is learning. The next day, no one asked what had happened to Petrov. His name was spoken once during the morning's duty assignments, then never again. The women were never mentioned once. The man who had been assigned corpse duty in his place remarked that in a city like Stalingrad, men disappear all the time. And how could we blame them? With the enemies outside our gates and the fear running afoul of our commanders. The only options were to obey and risk our lives, or desert and risk our lives. I replied that there was no use in wasting our breath on ghosts. This city of ash and bones had taken everything, so why give it one of the few things we had left? I heard more of the rumors that night. Talk of shades that would steal you from your bed if you didn't do your duty. Tales of ghouls and zombies coming back from the dead. Men spoke in half sentences, or not at all, keeping hushed tones in fear of whatever lay beyond the border of light the fires created. Watches were kept in groups of 4 or 5, same with the men on patrol. No one wandered through the ruins alone unless ordered to do so, and even then they did so with great consternation. Those who laughed the loudest during the day were the first to fall silent after the sun left. I began to recognize the pattern, though I wish I had never learned how to see it. It was not the strongest men who vanished first. It was the ones who spoke of slipping away from their posts, even in jest. The ones who whispered about defecting, who measured escape routes instead of patrol routes, men who hid crusts of bread beneath their coats while others starved openly, or who indulged in quiet acts of cruelty when they believed themselves on scene. These men disappeared, one by one, always them, never the others. Nothing was ever announced. Command issued no explanations, no lists, no warnings. Yet, understanding spread through the ranks all the same. The city had a memory. It watched, it kept track. Those who failed to carry their share of the weight were noticed, and in time, they were taken. The city did not hunt the innocent or the strong. It removed what weakened it, the way a body sheds a dying limb in the cold. Since that night, I have not been out after sunset. I did not just fear what lay beyond the firelight, but what it thought about me, what passing judgment it might decide on. I found myself obeying orders as quickly as possible, sharing what little food and drink I had, and standing watch without complaint. I was being as disciplined as I thought possible. Still, I slept poorly, my dreams filled with the sounds of heavy footsteps, the sharp tang of blood and heavy hot breath steaming in the cold, dark winter night. Sometimes I thought I heard movement beyond the thin walls of my barracks, slow and patient, circling but never approaching. I had not seen them, and I am not even sure that I had heard them. Yet every inch of my body warned of the danger that lurked beyond. Then came a day that marked me. One night, during guard duty, reports came in of a man who had been wounded by shrapnel. He had been heard calling for help, begging that someone would come save them. The officers argued about who should go in and retrieve him, if it was worth sending a stretcher. No one wanted to leave the light. When they looked at us, no one spoke up. When they looked at us, no voice spoke up. Eventually, the silence caused me to volunteer against my better judgment. The words had escaped my mouth before I had time to think about what I was saying. I told myself that it was mercy, that I was just doing my duty. And I felt a cold certainty settle in my gut. Weakness draws some attention, noise draws more, but blood draws the most. Wow, that's such a solid line in the context of this story, because it says that this character understands the world, and they understand what's happening better than we, the readers, even do. And that's something that's difficult to do. So I enjoy that line a lot. As I approached him, I felt that familiar feeling of being watched. The hairs on my arm letting me know that I was being hunted. The air felt heavy and charged, as though the stones themselves were listening and watching. I felt the heaviness of my coat, became acutely aware of my fogging breath, and heard the crunching of my boots in the snow. I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with sight. I could hear the man begging, pleading with someone, anyone, to help him. As his cries raked the air, I snapped at him, perhaps more harshly than I had intended, to be quiet. The sound of his voice made something twist inside me, a knot forming in my chest. When he grabbed at my arm, I shoved it away. The impulse came unbidden and violent, a primal moment of fear and desperation. I wish I could say that I had carried him back, that duty or mercy had prevailed. He would not stop crying out. Every sound that he made scraped against my nerves, loud and sharp, echoing through the ruins like a signal flare. I could feel it then, the cold pressing in further, the walls around us leaning in, the city itself listening and watching my every action. And, somewhere beyond the walls, I heard the sound of crunching snow. That was all it took. I tore myself free from his grasp and stepped back, telling myself that I would return, get more men to come and help. His eyes widened as he realized what I was doing, and the sound that he made was worse than any scream. I shredded through his throat until the only thing that came out was a ragged gasping. I turned and moved away before he finished, the sound carrying in my mind long after the echoes had faded. That's terrible. Just, he's leaving him, and the fact that he's telling himself, like, I'm leaving because I need to get more people and come back, and I think we know that he's not coming back. Or if he does, it's going to be too late. And he knows that, right? It's depressing and sad, and it's heartbreaking, honestly. Running felt wrong. As I moved back toward the camp, I could feel the eyes on me, fixed and unblinking. They were angry, heavy with the hunger that pressed against my spine. I walked instead, every fiber of my being coiled tight, ready to snap into a full sprint. I told myself that calm could be worn like a disguise, but if I did not flee, whatever watched me might turn its attention elsewhere. The snow beneath my boots felt different, softer. I became acutely aware of every depression, every unseen surface, the exact placement of my weight with each step. Behind me, something moved, neither fast nor slow, but deliberate, patient. I thought I could escape them. I thought distant speed or blind luck might save me. I was wrong. As I rounded a shattered corner, I saw it rise against the night sky, silhouetted against the dark. Grotesquely tall and broad, it moved on two legs but leaned forward as if it remembered another posture. Its long arms hung low, almost grazing the snow. Moonlight slid along the hooked claws that flexed slowly, idly, as though testing the cold. As it drifted closer, the smell reached me first. Wet fur, rot, old blood. Beneath it all lurked something animal and sour, the rank heat of a carcass left too long in the open. The silhouette wavered as it shifted its weight, head tilting with a canine curiosity, and for a moment I couldn't tell where the man ended and the beast began, only that it was studying me, patient and hungry. I turned to run, though I did not make it far. The impact came from the side, sudden and bone-shattering. I hit the ground hard, the breath driven from my lungs in a choking gasp. Weight crushed down on me, more than any man could carry. I felt claws tear into my back, my arms, my legs. Pain exploded through me, sharp and blinding. I screamed until my throat burned raw, until snow filled my mouth and muffled the sound. I remember teeth. I remember the heat of my own blood spilling into the snow. I remember the certainty, absolute and calm, that this was how it ended. But there was nothing. I do not know how long I lay there. Time had lost all meaning when I opened my eyes again. The cold no longer bit the way it should have. My body felt heavy, wrong, as though it had been rearranged while I slept. When I tried to breathe, my chest expanded with an ease that frightened me. Hunger came next, not the dull ache of starvation I had known for months, but something sharper, more focused and animalistic. It burned low in my chest and curled through my gut, demanding I satiate it. Every scent around me was suddenly clear, layered, and overwhelming. Blood was strongest, with fear close behind. I pushed myself up and froze. My hands shook before me, the fingers swollen and uncooperative, joints aching like they had been reshaped from the inside. My nails had grown dense and dark, no longer quite nails at all, catching the light with a dull, predatory sheen when I flexed them. A constant pressure gnawed at my teeth, buried deep in the jaw, forcing me to clench it shut to keep from exposing them. My heartbeat had slowed to something heavy and deliberate, each thud paced with patient certainty, as if the urgency of being human had drained away and something older had taken its place. And still, I remembered. I remembered my name. I remembered Petrov. I remembered the man I left in the snow. That memory cut deeper than any claw. It was the only thing that anchored me. The only proof I was still myself. I write this now because the hunger has not left me. It whispers to me. It tells me where to go, what to follow, who is weakest. I feel the city differently now, as though its ruins are familiar paths, its shadows welcoming. I know, with a certainty that terrifies me, that others like the one that killed me move through the streets, patient and watchful. I do not know how long I can resist. Each moment I remain still is an effort. Each word I write feels like a small defiance against what I am becoming. If this letter ends abruptly, if the words trail off or grow incoherent, then you will know the truth. The hunger has won. That's great. It's so tightly written, and we didn't linger in any one place for too long. There was enough of a buildup to make us understand the severity of these hounds and what's going on. But we didn't stay there too long that it took away the tension of the story. And I love when we end in a place where we know the main character is going to do something and we know what's going to happen, and the writer doesn't show us because we don't need to be shown. We've seen it throughout the whole story. We know what he's about to go do, right? And also this fact that, you know, he's making these small defiances by writing each letter as he types this out or as he writes this out. And we, in our heads, we like to think if this was us, we wouldn't go kill our friends. We wouldn't go kill innocent people. We think that we know that, and we try to tell ourselves that, and he's trying to tell himself that. But the truth is that at the end of this, that's what he's going to do. And we can tell ourselves that we wouldn't be the same, but we would. And it's the same thing with earlier when he decided to leave that guy dying. We'd like to think that we wouldn't make the same decision, and maybe we wouldn't. But the story pushed him into a situation where he had to. It's sad I can hear you. Yeah, Juke, I'm not too familiar with the Battle of Stalingrad. But honestly, especially for like a story on here, I'm not even like concerned with that. At least like for my enjoyment, because you know, I'm suspending my disbelief. And I know this is anchored in a historical event, but I mean, Reddit story, very well written, very tight. And I like that it was framed epistolary as letters, which is a very strong way of doing so. And I like that it was he left it somewhat open at the end. He was like, hey, if this ends with incoherent rambling or ends abruptly, know that the hunger has won. He decides not to end it incoherent. He decides to not end it incoherently, but he ends it with the hunger has won. So we can kind of question in our heads, like, is he going to hold out? Is he not going to hold out? And we can think about that, and we can fight about that in our heads the same way that he is. But truthfully, like I said, we know what he's going to go do. And we know that the hunger will win. I think the tone was, whether it was correct for the Battle of Stalingrad or not, I don't know. But the tone, as far as me enjoying the story for what it is, I thought worked really well. Yeah, I think this story, I think the title was good for getting some eyes on it. And there was a lot of great lines, as Broads points out in the comments. As if it remembered another posture is crazy, knowing what we know about the fact that it's human turned to hound. It's remembering what it used to be, the same way that he remembers his name, he remembers Petrov, but yet he's growing this hunger to kill. It's really, really strong. There's a lot to think about at the end of this. It's something that like I would consider reading this again off stream when I'm not like focused on all the different, like, you know, the chat and reading out loud, and I can just focus on the story, because I think there's a lot here. Awesome, Hypno. I'll be sure to check those out once you do. If you're in my Discord, which I think you are. Feel free to, like, whenever you finish a story, drop the link in there. There's a self promo chat in there, or like a feedback spot and places like that where, you know, you can drop a link to the story. You and me are going to get along just fine with these human dogs. That's right. Those stories are so similar, actually. It's, yeah, I got you. Yeah, so like whenever like you finish a story, drop it in there. I'd be happy to take a look and, you know, just tell me like, do you want feedback or you just want me to read it? And either way, like I'll do what'll help you the most. And I'm always happy to read stories. I'm reading whether or not I'm streaming, so don't feel like you're bothering me if you ask for some eyes on something, because I'm streaming right now, because I would be reading these stories anyway. It's just what I enjoy